You're not muted yet, right? Wait, can you mute it?
Yeah. Oh, mics are all happening. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we just wait until it's time for that.
Oh, so we can press and talk.
You're up. Sorry, everyone, we just wait. So the choices on live stream. No. Director, it's time now, probably, isn't it? Okay, we are now just about to live stream, so I'm just counting down the moments to that, and if we can have some quiet, that'll be fantastic. Just a thumbs up that we're all good to go. Okay. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's council meeting in Cromwell. I'll begin with a karakia. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki waho, tue ki roto, tue ki te here tangara, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, homie, huie, tae ki e. So yeah, huge welcome to everyone. We've got some special welcomes to do, and unfortunately I'm facing the wrong way, but I also need to be speaking into the microphone, so that's a bit of a challenge. Today we are very, very fortunate to be joined by the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Simon Upton, joined with Jeff Simmons, the Chief Economist as well at the Parliamentary Commission. So fantastic to have you here with us today. Another very important welcome to Mayor Tim Cadogan, Mayor of Central Otago District, joined with Taima Alley and Tracy Patterson, who are councillors as well at the District Council, Central Otago District Council. We have some public forum speakers today who you'll have a chance to meet, whether you are online or in person in this newly established chamber in Cromwell. And so, yeah, great to have you with us, public forum speakers, and thanks for putting yourselves forward to do that. Also, members of the public that are joining us today as well. So, yeah, it's fantastic to be in Central Otago where the sun is shining down and streaming in. Not perhaps in this room, but it certainly is outside. Our council regularly holds meetings throughout its region, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to do that in what is obviously the best region in New Zealand. So, you know, it's very hard to choose amongst the districts which would be a best though, because we are absolutely blessed with diversity and amazing environments right across this region. One of the most diverse regions in New Zealand for many reasons. So yeah, really fantastic to be here in Central Otago. Tomorrow we'll be out on visits to several sites of interest in the area as well, so we make the most of being in an area. We'll be looking at both terrestrial and aquatic, both challenges and successes in this area, and again a real pleasure to be able to do that. So today we have got a sound system whereby we don't actually need to press the on-off on the microphone, it just happens automatically. So all we need to do is speak into the microphone. So that's going to be a nice treat for us. We do have some, yes, we do have apologies. We have one from Councillor Lloyd McCall and another from Councillor Michael Laws. Would somebody care to move those? Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Somerville. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Now we're straight into the public forum today, and we have 3 public forum presenters. I have explained the setting to most, but not all. So we have 5 minutes for presenting, and then we have a little bit of time available for questions of clarification as well for each of those speakers. Our first speaker today, if they'd like to come up to the other end, will be Pierre Marasti on behalf of Extinction Rebellion. Welcome, Pierre.
Kia ora katoa. Globally, the month of June was the warmest June ever, and here in New Zealand, our seas are now warmer than they have ever been. As consequences, the Northern Hemisphere is experiencing a summer of extremes, and here, our extreme seawater temperatures are bad news, both for marine ecosystems and for our future ability to eat fish. So today we will focus on the Draft Strategic Climate Action Plan. It is a good document that covers all the areas needed: research and communication, collaboration with other institutions and organizations, housekeeping and public transport. But if having a theoretical structure is important, starting tangible emissions reduction is more important. To see how to make the Climate Action Plan effective, we can look at it through the lens of 5 Times Faster, a book by Simon Sharp that we warmly recommend you to read. This book, written by an insider at the highest level of climate diplomacy, analyzes why 40 years of climate talks have failed to create any meaningful changes. It also gives us an insight into the new thinking that might start to turn things around. It focuses on 3 aspects that we can apply to the Climate Action Plan: scientific communication, economy, and diplomacy. First, scientists have always failed to communicate the urgency of the climate crisis, because focusing on future averages is a mistake. Insurance companies doing risk assessment focus on the worst-case scenario, for the simple reason that otherwise they would go bankrupt. We need to start focusing on risk assessment when doing climate studies, and we must communicate about the worst-case scenario if we do not want to become bankrupt as a society. Secondly, the traditional equilibrium economic thinking, beyond being based on dubious foundations, favors the status quo, even when the status quo brings the worst economic outcome. We need more government interventions to support the rise of new greener techniques and technologies that might be more expensive to start with, but will become cheaper and more efficient in the future. Examples in the book are renewable electricity and batteries. So today in New Zealand, when it is already cheaper to electrify everything, there really is no valid reason to not accelerate the energy transition through policies. Thirdly, diplomacy. Globally, climate diplomacy has failed so far because they were more focused on the processes than on the tangible actions needed. Instead of being practical by focusing on various sectors individually to see how to decarbonize them as fast as possible, the world's nations have tried unsuccessfully for 40 years to all agree on what the process should be for everyone to reduce the emissions globally, while agreeing at the same time on which country should do more or less, depending on individual responsibilities. This is of course complete nonsense and was doomed to fail from the beginning. A much better approach is to identify which sectors are emitting greenhouse gases and to develop emissions reduction plans for each specific sector. We can apply this thinking here by focusing on one example from the Climate Action Plan. It states that we must investigate energy security issues in the region to determine whether this is a barrier to reducing reliance on solid fuel burning. Energy is at the center of the climate crisis, and solid fuel burning is part of the problem. Therefore, this is a misguided question. The electricity grid, more widely the energy infrastructure, have never been static things. There is no point wondering if today's electricity system is sufficient. It isn't. But looking at risk assessment, to not decarbonize will make us collapse. And we need energy to survive. So decarbonizing our energy system is unavoidable. Looking at the economy, especially considering that renewable electricity is already the cheapest form of energy available, this is obviously the only way forward. Investments will be needed, but they will pay dividends with cheap electricity. Looking at specific sectors, beyond the energy sector at large, we know that farms could take advantage of this energy transition to diversify their sources of revenues by becoming energy producers. So the right question should have been, what is the best way to assure our energy security through an increase of renewable electricity generation? This is one example amongst many of how the theoretical structure of the Climate Action Plan can be turned into action. We recommend you all to read 5 times faster, and of course, as always, we recommend you all to make it a priority to decarbonize your own lives. It is necessary to be free from fossil fuels in your own lives to really understand that they are not needed anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Any questions today? Oh, Councillor Weir.
I was just going to ask again, who did you say that book was by?
I will send you all the details, but it is Simon Sharp, who's been working for the UK government on international climate diplomacy.
Councillor Scott.
So in terms of this council's climate plan, how did we measure up? Do you give us a grade? Or did we get a pass or a fail or what?
Well, as I said, it is a good plan. It is theoretical, but the structure is there. It covers all the sectors needed, communicating about the problem, doing some science about the problem, then collaboration with organizations, institutions, and I guess I imagine businesses as well to actually make it happen. So the structure is there. Now you just need to put it into action. And that's why I brought these lances. You will get the email with all the details. And I think looking at the plan through this lens can put the plan into action.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. For those that don't know, Pierre joins every council meeting, and this time it is near your home. So it's good that we can be here closer to you this time. And thank you again for presenting in public forum.
Thank you.
Right, next speaker will be Jack Davis, who has actually circulated as well some written notes. I think I have them. Maybe it's just me actually. Yeah, okay. Thank you and welcome, Jack.
Thank you and welcome to Cromwell and the Chancellor to make the presentation today. My name is Jack Davis. My wife and I have a small holding in the Lowburn Valley. We have a house and buildings that are totally off-grid and have been for 8 years. We have a diesel generator as a backup for when the sun is not working. We have a water permit for 5.4 litres per second from the Stratford Creek. Now this is in a 90mm pipe for almost 3 kilometres. We wish to put a small hydro generator to use when the water is not being used for irrigation. The house below us could also have a similar system which would save them using a diesel burner to heat their house. This type of power generation leaves no carbon footprint at all, which is good for the planet and for those that live in it. We applied for a discharge permit to return the water back to the creek. This water is completely uncontaminated. The ORC have turned us down because our water permit, by their own admission, is only short of 2 words: hydro generation. This is a natural fit for us when the water is not being used for irrigation. Our water permit says irrigation, stock water and domestic. To us, this is about as domestic as you can get, running 2 houses and both of us stopping burning fossil fuels, generating clean green electricity. We met with ORC staff 5 weeks ago to discuss this matter. Their first response was that the Lowburn catchment water is over-allocated. We have this from the council verbally and in writing. This is completely irrelevant as we are not asking for an increase in water. Our point is this: needs to be a simple matter. We have no wish to go through the costly and time-consuming process we went through to get our current water permits. They were far too complicated. You're short of time and we're short of money, so let's keep this simple and realistic. It has been suggested by council staff that hydro generation could give us a 20-year water permit. This would be a very realistic outcome, and to us, common sense is prevailing. If this is going to set a precedent for other water users, good boy, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Davis. I can see we've got a couple of questions. Are you happy to take
Good.
some questions? Yep,
Yes,
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Really interesting submission. Just wondering, how much is the cost of the microgeneration system that you're looking at?
It'll probably finish up something in the vicinity of 10 grand.
And can I ask what your last consent cost and the duration?
It's 6 years, the water, which expires, I think, in 28. And
30 grand.
was 30 odd. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Got my advisor with me, it's help.
That's quite handy.
Detail.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Mepham.
Thank you, Jack, and good on you for being off the grid. It's quite an achievement to live naturally like this. In terms of your hydro generation, your generator, how many kilowatts, what size machine is it?
It's called a power spout, if that means anything to you. It'll generate, they told me this when I supplied my head and the volume that was going through, 1.1 to 1.3 kilowatts per hour.
Yep.
So in round figures, I'm going to get 25 kilowatts per day, which will keep me going when the fella upstairs isn't working.
Yeah. And have you got a fall that will help you generate that sort of power?
Oh yes, more than.
You've got that.
More than that fall. And the second house has still got another 50 metres of fall
Right.
that we could put another unit exactly the same in it. Seems to me like a really good use of the
Yes.
water.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kelleher online.
Hi, thank you for that. Sorry I'm not there. As you'll understand, Jack shearing is needing me sort of close to the wool shed at the moment. But a couple of questions just around, I've seen emails on this one too, come through in the last couple of days. How far downstream is the return back to the creek?
From the second house, we're talking about 30 metres maximum.
So the water would be out of the system for 30 metres.
Yep,
No,
And-
I don't think you've got that.
less than that, sorry.
It's from the tape, I think it's from the tape.
To the re-entries be kilometre, 2 kilometres?
Oh yeah, it's nearly sorry, you mean from the take to the exhaust?
Yeah, from the take point
Yeah,
to,
something like
from the
3K.
irrigation take point.
And
Sorry,
and
say
a
that
pipe
again?
all the way, 90mm pipe.
3 kilometres, I think,
Yep.
yeah.
3 Ks, right, okay. And then the volume of take that you'd be taking, sorry, because you'd be talking wintertime predominantly for generation, maybe?
Yes,
What would that be in comparison to the flow in the creek at the moment?
right. It'll make no difference to the flow of the creek. It'll only use about 4 litres a second, and our permit says 5.4 when we're irrigating.
Right. Right, and then so the flow in the creek, say right now, what would you guess be, like what percentage is that 4 or 5 litres a second in comparison to what's in the creek at the moment?
5%
5%, right.
maximum.
So my third question would be, why did you even ask?
Okay, you are one of many people that told me I should just go ahead and do it. I would have loved to, and I'm that sort of person, I would have. But the other person that is going to get benefit of this has to keep his nose clean because he works with the council. If mine happens to get bloodied, I can stand that, but he has to be genuine. So if I was on my own, it would have been done.
Good work, yep. Good answer. Yep.
Okay,
Well, we've got Councillor Malcolm
Thanks for
would
that.
like to ask a question, but we need to move on to our next forum person too. So, Councillor Malcolm.
Good, Jack. Just so currently you've got a permit to take 5.4 litres per second for irrigation.
Yes.
When you put this system in, that will be a non-consumptive use, so you won't actually be using that water. It will be going through the power generator, then straight back into the river. I assume.
It would go straight into the next generator and
Yep.
then into the river.
And then into the river.
Because we would only use it in the winter time because the rest of the time I would need it for irrigation.
So the amount of water you take out of the river goes back into the river.
Yes, it is. It's returned.
Thank you.
We're only borrowing the water.
But you're giving it back second hand now.
Can you
I suppose.
turn your button on, Kevin?
Uncontaminated.
Thank you.
Sorry, after saying you didn't need to turn the button on. we're- Oh,
You don't need to turn them off and on.
oh yeah.
Turn them on.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Davis. We're just getting ourselves organised here. But we heard you, so that's the most important thing. Thank you for coming along and speaking to us and sharing your message with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm of the Scottish heritage, so I can only wish you all lang may you lumry.
Thank you. Right, our next presenter then is Philip Murray from Coes. Welcome, Mr. Murray. 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Phil Murray and I'm chair of the Central Otago Environmental Society, or COES as it's known. So for those who don't know, COES is a local community group who gives voice to the environment. As a group, we reject the notion that the environment and the economy should be treated as two separate things. As most of you around the table here would agree, here in Central, the environment is the economy, being more closely linked than in most places in the country, Central being a natural stress environment over most of its parts, having the driest climate in the country and the highest proportion of class 7 and 8 land, where overstretching ecological capacity shows up quickly and starkly. in our rivers and in our landscapes. And where the road to ecological recovery is a long and slow one, full of uncertainty and ecological tipping points. Consequently, we are very grateful for our regional council in its regional land and water plan, recognising the simple fact that our future is in maintaining healthy ecological function of our natural resources, our water, soils and biodiversity. We applaud them for having shown the courage and conviction to defend the implementation of this plan against considerable pressure from ministers to delay and possibly undermine it. Despite the actions proposed in the plan to achieve what is a widely supported vision for Otago, being in our view overly cautious, such as the minimum flow regime for the Menhira Kia catchment, at least it's a step on the road to building a truly sustainable economy, one that doesn't continue a history of mining natural capital in exchange for achieving built capital. That's a zero-sum game in our view. As a group, we are sensitive to the trade-offs that will be required in moving land use in Central Otago to a more sustainable form and to the economic, social and cultural aspects of doing so. We do, however, wish to be part of the process in deciding these trade-offs and are willing to play a positive role in the process of change. We support the view that the best way to move land use towards aligning with ecological capacity is through farmer catchment groups, where those who are in the best position to effect the changes needed are leading the way. However, for the rest of the community to have trust in such an approach requires that the vision we have for our environment is translated into clear, measurable terms with clear goals for improvements and credible, enforceable rules for getting there. Without these in place, it's difficult to have the trust that will be needed to make this work, particularly with our recent history of rapid allocation, we would say over-allocation, by the Council of Water Rights in Menhira Kia with scant scientific understanding at the time of the ecological effects on water bodies. We are not encouraged by the farmer catchment group representing the Menhira Kia catchment, the MCG, applying to government to fast-track raising of Falls Dam. To our group, this is simply doubling down on an economically and ecologically irrational farming model for this catchment, where we are facilitating a land use more suited to Southland and the Waikato, where it rains a lot. We're the driest part of the country, where water is scarce. We need to make the best possible use of the water we have without stuffing our natural environment, one that has huge value to most of our community. We don't currently have a legal framework to allow this to happen, such as one that sheets the cost of externalities back into land users and water rights that are tradable to the most profitable users. So why would we support a massive investment in expanding the current land use by raising Falls Dam? We will be looking to the Council to significantly increase its spending on environmental monitoring and reporting back to the community on process. In that way, we can all gain trust and confidence that the system is working.
And nearing the time limit.
And we will be more liable to support the use of ratepayers' funds in supporting work addressing environmental problems, arguably caused by private enterprise. We're all a bit wary of continuing to allow some to privatise the profits and socialise the costs. However, we're all prepared to make a compromise to make this work. So well done, councillors, for getting the Regional Land and Water Plan through, and we look forward to being implemented and to COES playing a positive role in moving Central Otago towards the plan's vision. Thanks for the opportunity for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Mr. Murray. The council will decide yet on whether it notifies its land and water plan, so it's yet to make that decision. Thanks. Questions though of clarification? Councillor Noon.
I think it's on. Phil, you describe a bit of an us and them. That's the flavour I got from your submission. But would you agree that essentially the outcomes we're looking for the environment means that we all collectively are in the same situation? We need to work together,
Definitely.
collaboratively, to get the best outcome.
Could agree more.
Okay. The second one is your comment about Falls Dam. Do you or do you not agree that part of the environmental enhancement, improvement, improvement for the Menehira Kia means, and it currently exists with Falls Dam contributing to the environmental benefits of the Menehira Kia. Would you agree that any raising of Falls Dam would also have that same impact?
No, I think it's just doubling down on the model that's there, and that to actually pay for irrigation schemes, as you know, are quite expensive. To actually pay for the raising of Falls Dam will require and lead to an expansion of intensification of land use. And at the moment, there's nothing to stop that intensification being in the form of increased dairy support that has significant adverse effects on the river, and we don't believe there's a framework to protect the water bodies from that yet.
Thank you. We've actually come to the end of our allotted time for public forum, and we do need to move on to our important presentation from Parliamentary Commissioner today. So just moving through, thank you very much, Mr. Murray, for coming and presenting in person. Appreciated. We just need to confirm the agenda. We have nothing else that's popped up, so we can do that without moving that. Declarations of interest. Councillors are reminded to advise of any changes to what they have put forth and is online. If anyone wants to signal anything at the moment, they're welcome. So yeah, we've moved to the part of the agenda for presentations, which I have mentioned earlier is a really unique and important opportunity for our region to host Mr. Simon Upton, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, who is going to be presenting verbally on his important Going with the Grain report. We'll just allow a little moment for that to get set up, and it looks like that's going to happen really smoothly. So yeah, welcome in whenever you're ready, and your mic is working as well. We just need to point it towards us and speak into it.
Will it come up there, the screen?
Oh,
I mean, I can't see it otherwise.
It is.
It's working. You can
yeah,
see it.
he wants to
see
say
it.
what he's speaking to. Yeah. Yeah. Do we just, can we sort that? If
That
so,
looks to
we
be
could
coming
adjourn
right. Yes,
for a
we are.
moment.
Right, we're fine.
Oh, good. Perfect. Start whenever you'd like to.
Thanks.
In your hands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, to say I'm not an important presenter. I think the people you said getting on to our important presentations, I think the people you've been hearing from are just as important. It's very interesting, actually, listening to what they've got to say. This is my chief economist, Jeff Simmons. So we have some very bright people in my office. Just in case, I spoke to quite a few of you over lunch, but just in case you're in any doubts about my status, I report to Parliament. So my boss technically is the Speaker. I'm not part of the government. I don't report to ministers, and ministries are among the entities, including regional councils, that I have legal authority to review under the Environment Act 1986, and I'm the fourth person to hold this office. My predecessor, you probably knew, Dr. Jan Wright. I broadly make my own agenda. From time to time, of course, governments introduce pieces of legislation, and so I make submissions, just like you do. But for the rest of the time, my role is to review the management of the environment in New Zealand, the system we set up to manage it, whatever it is for the time being, and also draw to Parliament's attention political, environmental issues that politicians need to be aware of. So often those are things which are right off the radar screen, and talking to some over lunch, I'm aware that some of you have read some of them. I've done, for instance, a big report on weeds. I've done a report on are we building harder, hotter cities, on soils, just done one on modelling of water at the catchment level. So quite a variety of things. But this piece of work, going with the grain, changing land uses to fit a changing landscape, this is a piece of work that, what with COVID in the way, actually ended up taking more than 3 years to land, and is actually a follow-on from an earlier report I wrote called Farms, Forests and Fossil Fuels. And Farms, Forests and Fossil Fuels was my attempt to use modelling to discover what business as usual with the emissions trading scheme and the sort of carbon prices that were being mooted would mean for the New Zealand landscape. And the short answer was that we cover ourselves in pine trees because it's cheaper than reducing emissions. And I have been of the view for some years now that this is a very bad outcome. It's a very bad policy outcome, which wasn't really understood or foreseen at the time the policy was introduced. I was actually the person responsible for arguing for a net approach on climate. But I think that that has proved to be really problematic, and if we don't do something about it, and I'm advocating taking forestry out of the ETS completely, we will end up with a massive driver for land use change caused by our desire not to reduce emissions but simply to pay a cheaper price and plant trees. That report, Farms, Forests and Fossil Fuels, was a bit crude, and we decided that we needed to do a more sophisticated piece of work which tried to bring in other environmental issues. So rather than trying to tackle climate separately, we wanted to add in water and biodiversity. And so we embarked on another modelling exercise. And that modelling exercise led to, and if I touch this, nothing happens, so I'll let you do it. Look at that. Led to this report, led to this piece of work, which was 2 case studies on a much more sophisticated piece of modelling with scenarios to say, okay, if we continue as we are, and we have policies on water, quality and quantity, and we're trying to tackle sediment, and we're trying to tackle biodiversity, and you do this all at once with separate policies, where do you end up? And then if you did it differently, with some different scenarios, different land use choices, what would it look like? And we produced 2 case studies, and one was close to you, the Mataura, and the other was way up the north, the northern end of the Hokianga Harbour, the Wairoa. Those 2 catchments, deliberately chosen because they were totally different and they could scarcely have been further away. And that produced some interesting results. The trouble with models is that they're always wrong. I mean, they're only as good as the inputs, aren't they? They're a useful tool, but I was a bit worried that if I just introduced the world to 2 case studies, people would either have an argument about the model, or they'd say, well, that's got nothing to do with me because that's the Mataura, which to some extent is probably right because catchments are all different. So we thought, well, we have to publish these. We've spent public money on them, and that's on the website. You can go and read it. But we thought maybe it'd be better to produce a report which says, what are the lessons we learned? Because we put a lot of work into those studies. It wasn't just modelling. We actually went to the communities. We talked to the farmers, we talked to iwi, we talked to businesses, we helped them to help us construct the scenarios we were modelling. So there's a lot of community input in this because we didn't want blowback, people to say, you didn't even talk to us, you just did this model. And, you know. So we put a lot of work into it. But in the process, we learnt quite a lot about people and about the way they think about these issues. And it's the human side of this, actually, which ended up being more interesting and more important than the environmental side. And so that led to our second report, which you've mentioned, Madam Chair, going with the grain, changing land uses to fit a changing landscape. Can I ask councillors, can you put your hand up if you have 1, seen it, 2, read it? You've all seen it, who's read it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jolly good. I encourage the rest of you to read it for this reason. This is not terrifying reading. It's about 70 pages, okay? And we use lots of white paper, and there's lots of pictures and figures. So this is not daunting stuff. You can read it in an afternoon. And it was deliberately written at that sort of length, that level of granularity, so that it was accessible to the public. And it tries to say, if you wanted to tackle environmental problems in rural New Zealand in a joined-up way, how would you do it? And I'll take you through the report quickly, but let me say this. You know, it's a jigsaw. You've got all of these bits, just like the landscape's a jigsaw. We've put them together one way. You might put them together another way. I mean, we're not saying we've got the answers, and it's not my job to say we've got the answers on something as complicated as this. Nobody should listen to one person who thinks they've got the answers. But the reason we've done it is to say to politicians like yourselves, regional, local level, and also national level, obviously, look, if you wanted to think about this differently, how could you go about it? Because I'm aware we've been spinning our wheels on this stuff for 2 or 3 decades. And I'm not saying we haven't made progress. There's certainly been a sea change in the way people understand the problem and its seriousness, but actually getting human beings to make changes, you know, our thinking processes seem to me often we're a bit behind what's happening in nature. It's steaming ahead and we're running to catch up. So this report's about how we might be able to do things a little bit differently. Okay, so first point to make is, the report says there's nothing new about changing land uses. And that's the change in land cover in New Zealand. You've got the pre-human, and then you've got the arrival of Polynesians, and we see this dramatic drop in indigenous forest, and then you see the arrival of Europeans, and it takes another hit. And you've got a lot of grass, got more tussock, and so on and so forth. But that is the norm, and this is even more interesting, this little diagram here, this Sankey diagram. That's the land use change that occurred in New Zealand between 1996 and 2018. And where we ended up in 2018, on the right-hand side, those hectareages come from the same range of land uses on the left-hand side. And you can see that the big change is the move to exotic forestry. So the biggest change of land use has been from both high and low producing grassland and indigenous forest actually, to exotics. And the other big change going the other way around is from things like forestry and low producing grassland to high producing grassland. And a lot of that's going to be that pumice country around Taupo, where growing trees, frankly, economically, was less valuable than dairying. So that's a snapshot of our economy as much as anything else. No, you move me forward, because these good people have got other agendas and they're busy. So here's 4 key problems we've identified. And we don't think that you can think straight about this topic if you aren't prepared to confront these issues. So each one of them is, they're more or less contentious, but that's really not the point. We don't think you can avoid them. You can't get into the stuff and avoid it. First of all, the way we use land needs to change, at least in some places, because with all the known technologies and management techniques we've got, we can't actually achieve the bottom lines that we have said we'd like to achieve. And that Venn diagram shows you sediment blue, nitrogen yellow, phosphorus pink, and these are the catchments, coloured on the map. These are the catchments where we are beyond. We're beyond the limit by, it's mostly 30%, 40% for sediment. In other words, we're at a level where known land use management techniques or technologies can bring us back to where we need to be. And you'll note that in the middle there was 1.5% of catchments. I've got that sort of nasty red magenta colour. By area, it looks to be largest in the Horizons Regional Council, but you have your share, as does Southland. This is where in all 3 contaminants, you're way outside where we're trying to get back to. You see where I come from, North Waikato, there, sediment is the main one, as it is in up Tairāwhiti and so on. Other places like Canterbury, it's nitrogen, but in some places it's all 3. And the other thing is, if you bring biodiversity into the picture, you get this map. The pinkier you go on this map, the more restoration of the natural biodiversity is a priority. And that's where we've lost most of it, you see. So all that grey stuff down the west side of the South Island, no probs there. It's not the high priority to be restoring so much. You want to preserve it because we've lost so much. But on the east coast in particular, in this island, and right around different parts of the North Island, there are places where the ecosystems which were once there are now extremely rare. So the pinkier you get, the more you need to restore. Now, the point of these last two maps about catchments and about restoration is this. The same problems do not exist equally everywhere. And I just don't think you can think about these issues with a one-size-fits-all from Wellington approach to this. It's got to relate to the landscape and the people who live in it. So, this is the second thing. So first of all, we have to change land use. Second thing is, even if you didn't want to change land use, you're going to have it changed for you. The climate is redealing the cards. And I want to show you two lovely photos. Just stay with this one for a sec. These two photos, by the way, are from up the east coast after Cyclone Gabrielle, okay? This is the photo you show if you want to show that forestry is the culprit. And this photo is the photo you show when you want to show that farming is the culprit, because you can see which bit held on better. But the point is, it's not a matter of farming or forestry being the culprit or whatever. What we can see is that there are land uses which just don't match what the land can actually sustain and support. So, this one, I think most New Zealanders get this. I mean, the floods in Auckland, this is not just a thing that happens in Tairāwhiti. This can happen in your biggest, most sophisticated city. This can happen anywhere, and it will. And it will. I just actually read today that yesterday, I think, was the hottest day ever recorded. And it was 0.1 of a degree higher than a day a few days ago last year. And we've now had 12 months above 1.5 degrees. So we are moving into literally uncharted territory. Third point. This is a third thing, if you're a politician, you can't ignore. The policy landscape is fragmented. And, I mean, you don't have to read all that. This is just to show you there's lots of things happening, okay? And these have come out of central government over the last couple of decades, and all well-intentioned and all making a contribution. But if you wanted to try to stitch all this together, you've got acres and acres and acres and acres of print and complexity, and thousands of public servants and regional government people and so on and so forth to try to join up. And let's look at it when it comes to funding. This is how fragmented the funding is. I think a lot of rural people don't realise how much money the government does actually spend supporting rural industries and rural lifestyles. It's about $750 million. About 1/3 of that, so 250 million, is in one sense or another related to the environmental sustainability problems of our land-based industries. So roughly $250 million. And here's a nice map to show you how all the fragmentation comes together. I call this my amoeba diagram. I invented this at the OECD in Paris. Very proud of this one. We had to develop a special template to do it. If you looked at biodiversity, climate, freshwater and land erosion, there's currently about 20 different pots of money that the government sprays money out of around the country. Now, just put yourselves in the position of from Mars policy advisor. Would you decide to spend money to assist the environment through 20 different nozzles? I think it's very unlikely. And one of the things that if you talk to people about dealing with government, they'll say, particularly the closer you get to the community, dealing with all of this stuff and then all of the tendering and accountability and so on and so forth, it's just a nightmare. We were talking to Thriving Southland last night. One of the things Thriving Southland's been able to do is act really as an aggregator to deal with all of that stuff so that the people who are trying to do stuff don't. But it is, whoops, we've lost our picture. Can someone help us find, there's our picture. But the point is that you've got a lot of money being spent in a very fragmented way. Okay, next point. This is the fourth key issue, and I think for everyone in this room, this is the one I really would like you to think about. I'm sure you have, but you may not have heard it said quite in this way. But look, we're trying ultimately to manage the environmental issues on the basis of private property boundaries. Now, there's a lot of support for that, and it's logical in a sense. A lot of farmers will say, hey, listen, I'm happy to take care of what I do on my place, and I'll be held accountable, you know. We'll have debate about what you're being held accountable to, but, you know, I'm responsible for what happens. And you saw this in the climate debate. I want to count every gram of carbon, and I want to do this and want to do this. Fine. The trouble is the landscape didn't know about your property boundaries. And environmental problems don't originate and end within property boundaries. We all know the air's moving, the water's moving, the soil's moving, a whole lot of stuff is moving, and we are all perturbing that system in different ways. And when we did this work starting in Southland, we actually used Clint Risman's insights using physiographics to get a handle for this. And just let me run you through some slides here. This is not your part of the world. So this is up in the Wairua catchment. And this is the northeast of this big Wairua catchment, which runs into the northern end of the Hokianga Harbour. And that's what the satellite will show you. And you can see that there's obviously some forest down on the bottom there. This is a block of land. And then you've got in the middle of it, you see there's a relatively flat bit in the middle. That's the Hikurangi Swamp, which is a very, very modified place with a very expensive drainage scheme, all sorts of problems, heavy rain events causing all sorts of issues. For Māori, it was a major tuna basket, and they're getting minced up in pumps trying to evacuate water from paddocks and things, and there's a lot of silt going down, and of course the Hokianga is a very important snapper hatchery. You know, this is the top end of a big catchment. Now, let's have a look at the property boundaries on that piece of land. Nice and busy. Lots and lots of different parcels of land. You can see that forest at the bottom, that white bit. I must check this. I assume that's dock. Now, let's look at the layers of information that can be pulled together, which someone like Clint Risman does. Okay, there's your elevation. There's your slope. Terrain roughness. Rainfall. Soil pH. And then the stuff that I think Clint's really brought to the fore, radiometrics, which is the sort of background radioactive decay, which is telling you about the underlying geology of the place, which is influencing so much of the stuff. And then finally, here's the overlay. If you put all of those layers together, that means land is susceptible to E. coli contamination at different intensities. So red, it's super susceptible, and blue, less susceptible. Now, let's put the cadastral boundaries back on that, and this blow up a bit so you can see it better. And I come back to where I started, that nature didn't actually know about our property boundaries. And if you try to manage things just within the property boundary, you're doomed. Because the guy who's in the hotspot isn't necessarily causing it. And the guy who's in the clear might be actually causing something. But it's all linked up. So we need to find another level to make decisions at. And it's not necessarily, before you jump to it, the regional council. So that's the problems. Now, if you were going to do things differently, we also said, hold it, are there any things that stand in the way of land use change? And I'll give you 4, and I'll be very quick. First is water, and this is particularly a case of when it comes to quantity, is locked up in resource consents for a period of time. It's not necessarily the most efficient way of allocating water. Now, this is not an ideological point. The most important thing is that you're reserving sufficient flow to generate the ecological services that you need. But to the extent that there is water available to be used, is allocating it by permit the most efficient thing to do? Because if somebody can come along with a much more efficient use of it, higher value, higher economic value, no more environmental impact, why can't they just transfer this? Currently, water permits, the value of that water is capitalised in land values. And there is a case to be made for separating those two. This is Environmental Economics 101. But if you wanted to do that, you have to confront Māori rights and interests. These aren't going to disappear. They're there in Article 2 of the treaty. The Land and Water Forum a few years ago said we should tackle this, we shouldn't be scared of it. I'm just saying the same thing. I don't think we should be scared of it. I think we should be prepared to tackle it. Second barrier, land use controls. In many parts of New Zealand, you can't subdivide. If you are a farmer being asked to clean up and you need access to capital and you are not a super profitable operation, flicking a couple of lifestyle blocks may well be the way you can stay there, clean up the environment, and everyone's happy. But there are all sorts of subdivisional controls on this stuff. That needs to be looked at. Thirdly, I'll come back to this one. We have an emissions trading scheme. I talk about a barrier to land use change. It's more like a sort of a battering rod for land use change. It's causing it in one particular direction. And fourth, and for most landowners, this is the one that's in their minds, profitability. If you're profitable, you can afford to do stuff. If you are on very, very marginal economic returns, you can be told you've got to clean up, but where's it going to come from? And this is really a huge barrier for many people. If they can't actually flick a bit of land, you know, to freeze up some capital or whatever, they really are between a rock and a hard place. And I think the point that I'm really wanting to make to politicians, whether it's yourselves or whether central ones, is this: if you want to have an honest discussion about land use change in New Zealand, you have to have an honest discussion about who pays. This is expensive. It's not going to happen for nothing. You can't avoid the fact that this is an expensive issue. And let me now pretend I am the government and I'm raising the taxes. I can tell you this: the scale of the problems is so big, there is absolutely no chance the taxpayer can pay for all of this. So if you think there's a pot of money that can be, you know, let's subsidise it, you'll rapidly blow the bank. There are all sorts of land use changes, go back to my earlier slide, which are happening in the marketplace right now. Somebody says, I can actually do better with land doing something else. And they buy the person out, the old use goes, the new one comes in, and you can make better use of the land, better use of the environment. Why would you ever want to subsidise that? I mean, you get people who get to the end of their farming life, the kids don't want to take over, so they sell. This land use changed. It's very unlikely a young person coming in is going to do things the way the older person did. So there's all of these ways in which land use change occurs naturally. You don't want to stuff that up. What you want to do is to reserve any money you are going to put out there for the hard cases, the bits where you can't actually see a way for it to happen naturally. So we end up, we do things in fours, you see, 4 key problems, 4 barriers, 4 things that can make a difference. And here's the 4 things we think can make a difference. First of all, bring decision-making closer to the people who are having to make significant management changes or even change land uses. Now, this was a learning that came from Southland in particular, where we discovered a really quite remarkable network of catchment groups. And last night we met with 20 of the 21 catchment group leaders in the Mataura catchment, which is the one that we modelled. And these are all people who are really, you know, quite geared up about the issues. You know, they understand them, they want to do something about it, and they've got people in their communities who want to work with them on this. Now look, these people know far more about the landscape than they do in Invercargill, and certainly than they do in Wellington. And you've got to find a way of empowering them to make some of the difficult decisions. Now, I want to be clear, I am not saying that environmental cleanup is voluntary and that you have a catchment group and they decide, oh, well, we can do about 20% of this and then we'll all go back to sleep. That won't work. We have to achieve outcomes, and the way to do that, it seems to me, is to use the catchment as the unit, which is what we've been doing in New Zealand for a very long time. It's a very good system. We have catchment-based regional government. It should be, at the regional level, that we say, this is the outcome we're after. These are the main drivers of the problem, and we need to break this into bite-sizable chunks, because some of those catchment groups in the Mataura will be responsible for a bigger percentage of the fraction of the problem than others. And so you look to some places to do more than other places. And think about it from the government side. If central government was going to subsidise something, or if you were going to put ratepayers' money, you wouldn't sprinkle it evenly over the whole catchment. You would spend it where you were going to get the biggest bang for your buck. You're going to get the best environmental outcome, And I'd say also assisting the people who can't do it. So trying to focus it on the most constrained people who can deliver the most to you. So I think that something like catchment groups is really important. By the way, we didn't go into how they should be governed. Should they be compulsory? Should they be voluntary? I mean, we've tossed around a lot of times with people the thought that, okay, it could be carrot and stick. If you join the catchment group and you take part in whatever decisions they come up with, that's fine. If you don't, the regional council will tell you what to do. It's just you get the rule book without negotiation. So, but you could do something like that. But it's pretty clear to me that you will do more in some places than in other places. But it all has to add up to the cleaner environmental outcome that we are after. That applies to everything except greenhouse gas emissions, methane in particular. Because all those other problems, including nitrous oxide, relate to the physical environment underneath you. They're variable. The methane which comes out of a cow or a sheep is going to be the same in Northland as it is in Southland. And there, I think you can use a national policy instrument. And I'll come on to that. Secondly, what can make a difference? This one you'll like. This is an easy thing to say. I still haven't managed to get anyone to do anything about it. We need cheap, easy access to high-quality environmental information. And I mean easy access, open access. Actually, cheap means free. Someone has to pay, but I think this is an investment that needs to be made by the government as a fundamental public good. There is a lot of information out there, and I think Clint Risman's shown us that in fact, without even adding more information, you can make a lot out of the stuff that's there. But he acknowledges we've done a whole report on this, on environmental information. There's a lot of gaps. So the government should fill those gaps. But right now, the information's owned, some by CRIs, some by universities, some by MPIs, some by regional councils, and you can't integrate it. And if you need it, you often have to pay. And if you're trying to get people to write farm plans or clean up or whatever, and the information is either too expensive or inadequate, you're just going to get pushback. So I've said to the ministers of the last government, I said it for the full 6 years, or 5 of the 6 years, and I'm now saying it to the new one. You cannot walk away from this. It may not seem sexy, but it is in fact the heart of everything. The regional council and the catchment groups should never be having a debate about the information. We should have invested in it. We should all be agreed on the facts. The hard bit is, okay, how do we do something? And that's a human issue. But the environmental information, for heaven's sake, surely this should be the same. I've already said this one. What can make a difference? Being upfront about the potential cost. I mean, I think just putting a regulation in place so we can have a bottom line, walk off into the sunset, leave it to the regional council to do. I mean, this isn't being honest with people. And people need to own a problem, and one of the ways of owning a problem is to understand that at all the dimensions, cost is a critical one. And we'll all have a fight about who should pay for what, I know that, but you must put this up front. This has got to be there. It's not a reason for not doing stuff, but it is a reason for making sure that whatever you do, you've chosen the most important bit. You've got, so if you've got a goal, you've got to prioritise it and spend your money in the places which will make a difference. And you won't get that unless you're clear about the cost. And finally, and my final point, the fourth thing that can make a difference is phasing forestry out from the NZETS. Now listen, I'm the only person in New Zealand arguing for this, and somebody... Those two, yeah? oh, I've got somebody else. Right, fantastic. No, there's very few people who are arguing for this one because it's very, very convenient for all sorts of people, for environmentalists. This is not at the front of their list, but it's very nice if it's all going into pine trees and there's no longer animals, and that solved the N and the P and the sediment and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll worry about the harvest when that happens, And there's other people who are delighted because, well, it means I can go on burning gas or coal or whatever. It's not so expensive. We can buy forest units and we can offset all this stuff. I do not believe that this is sustainable. We are moving into a hotter world, a world where we know much less about what the climate holds, a world in which risks like fire, like disease, and we've got just about a near monoculture of Pinus and Pinus radiata in many parts of the country. These are going to be at risk, an increasing risk in a hotter, less predictable world. So why would you say our solution to a hotter world caused by greenhouse gases is to park a whole lot of carbon in trees on a landscape, and, this is the point, say, oh, by the way, we know this, the carbon will stay in the atmosphere for thousands of years, so those trees will stay there for thousands of years as well. That's what you've got to be prepared to say. You have to say those trees are permanently there. And of course, think about it from an economic point of view, you have lost all option value on that land. You have forever committed it to those trees. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got trees on my farm which are best part of a century old, and the last few years seems to be that I wish they'd all fall at once. Every time we have a storm, one comes down over a fence, and then we spend the next time trying to chop the thing up and get it away. I mean, they do come to an end. What contract have you got with a carbon farmer today that in 2115 they will replant when all of that gets burned or whatever? This is a kicking the can down the road approach, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone other than myself to say I was responsible for the policy setting that has led to this. I never foresaw that this would happen, I must say. But we're the only country in the world relying so heavily on this and making it part of an emissions trading scheme. So, we should phase out from it, and here are my alternatives. Now, if you thought you were, oh, fantastic, I've got rid of that one, well, I'd like to create another one. I said to you a moment ago, methane from animals is the one externality, environmental pressure, which is the same regardless. It doesn't matter whether you're farming on the west coast, up Tairāwhiti, Northland. Basically, the methane emissions from animals will be the same. So, in that case, you can have a national one-size-fits-all policy instrument. When we did the modelling for our two case studies, we proposed a methane levy, and the current government says it's going to push off a price on carbon, but it's still going to have a price. And I don't know what they're thinking of. I assume it's a levy. Well, I'd say, actually think again, because I think an ETS would work for methane in a way that won't work for carbon. And the reason I say that is that, broadly speaking, the life of methane in the atmosphere is relatively short-lived, and the life of a pine tree is relatively short-lived. So if you were a dairy farmer, and dairying is profitable, reasonable margins there, and our modelling shows that even with a methane price, dairying would hang in there. If you planted once enough trees to provide the cooling, if you like, for the warming of the animals, you could actually say this milk is completely climate neutral. We've had no impact on the environment. You'd be the only country in the world that can make that claim, actually. We know there's a warming associated with methane. We've actually planted the trees to net that off. It's not a 100% solution for this reason. You'd need to plant a lot of trees. My team has done this work. No one else in the world, I think, has done this. Using scientists, internationally peer-reviewed. The number we've come up with is 0.6 of a hectare per dairy cow. There's an awful lot of hectares because there's an awful lot of dairy cows. But the point is this, it's part of a solution. I'm very supportive of the research program that the previous government started, the current government's continuing with, to look for a methane vaccine, looking for food additives, looking for all of these science solutions. And if they could give us 20 or 30%, that'd be great. But trees could give us some more. And we don't need to go to zero in terms of cooling, but we need to show the world that because we say we're so good at this stuff and we're so efficient at this stuff, we can be better than anyone else, actually, in mitigating the effects of that warming. And it's by far and away New Zealand's biggest contribution to warming, except the way we cut down the trees right at the beginning, starting 800 years ago. So, a separate ETS to manage methane. Secondly, if you take trees out of the ETS, guess what happens? The carbon price rises, and people can no longer kick the can down the road. They actually have to invest in climate-friendly technology, and in the meantime, they have to purchase access to emissions permits. The price goes up. You don't have auctions failing, the government's income goes up, and then the government could use some of the proceeds to plant the worst land, not the easy land, the worst land. Like up Tairāwhiti, where, frankly, it needs to go back to natives, and we need to find out how to do that. It's got to be permanent. That's expensive, slow stuff. That is where public money should be spent, not finding a solution on a farm which can afford to do this stuff anyhow. So, I don't mind if you planted pine trees to offset your cows, no problem at all. But I rather like the idea that today's fossil emitters would effectively be taxed to undo some of the damage we've done to the landscape in the most difficult places. And, is that it? That's it. Question. So, there you are. How long did that take? 35?
That was amazing.
Right.
Yeah. We're just,
I hope it's not too long, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
No,
but
that was absolutely
but
perfect.
There you are. That gives
and
you
we've got
can ask some questions.
heaps of time for this amazing opportunity. So the first person with their hand up was Councillor Mepham, followed by Councillor Scott.
Simon, familiar with the ETS? I've been involved with the forestry company for quite a while. But one of the things that always puzzled me was the calculation of the credits for native plantings were always were less than the radiata calculation. So people would plant radiata to get the credits quicker.
It's
But,
because
but the calculation for native wasn't helping at all. So
because it's slow. I mean, over the life of the natives, if you give them 200 or 300 years, after about 60, 70 years, it really starts to tick up. But it's just that we're not, this policy isn't really a policy with a multi-century objective. It's trying to get to net zero by 2050. So everything's built around the quick growing stuff. But it's not there's anything wrong with natives. They just sequester much more slowly. They grow more slowly.
So would there be a calculation that would take into account the fact that natives take longer to sequester carbon? I mean,
well, there is.
What?
I mean,
well, why isn't it? I mean,
you mean you can't plant them at all? It's not economically worth it. It will not earn you units fast enough to defray the costs.
Yeah, but why can't you make it so that the units are earned fast enough?
Well, you're then just playing an accounting game. You're saying even though you're not really trapping the carbon, we'll say you were. I mean, there's no way out of that.
It would encourage native plantings.
It's a no. Well, okay, that's a different matter. If you want to encourage native plantings, you wouldn't use a carbon-based ETS to do it. I've given you the answer, my answer, and that is use some of the revenue from the ETS for then the government to purchase native afforestation, but doing it where that would make most sense. So not every farmer planting a few totras along the edge of whatever. You choose Tairāwhiti, you choose... I mean, Māori have been very clear to the government on this one. They're not prepared to say, yeah, that's just fine, reduce the role of forestry in the ETS. They say, we've got some of the worst land in the country. It's the one thing that can earn an income, and if you're going to take that one away from us, we're in real trouble. And I accept that. It's one of the flies in the ointment with what I'm proposing. So my answer to them is to say, well, look, I accept the problem. We shouldn't distort the entire pattern of land use in New Zealand through the ETS. We should find another source of funding to help native afforestation, and you could do that if you had an emissions trading scheme which generated auction revenues. Now, right now, auctions are failing. There's no money coming in. You see? So that's...
There's a lot of carbon credits on balance sheets, worth billions of dollars, I would imagine, for forestry companies. So, I mean, how would you suddenly eliminate...
Right, okay. So, look, you can only make changes for the future, on this stuff. People in good faith have planted the forests, they've earned the units, or they've bought units or whatever. So you have to you've got to leave that in the system. What you can do is to say we're no longer, for the future, going to accept forestry units. We're not going to allow them to be created from those forests. So
post 2024.
Whatever, you could choose a year. And if you didn't want to do it all in 1 year, if you felt nervous about it, you could say, well, we'll slowly, they'll only be worth 80%, then 60, then 40, then 20. You could blend it down over time. So, again, I haven't gone into the details. I mean, look, here's the economist. You have a clever observation.
It takes a while for the money to start coming through, but it does really start to generate some serious cash by 2030. And the other point that Simon hasn't mentioned is, by the way, folks, if you think that the emissions trading scheme has got this thing covered, mid-2030s, it's not going to have things covered. Actually, we're going to be needing the extra government money to go into more forestry to offset the units, the emissions that aren't in the emissions trading scheme by the mid-2030s. And that'll be the time when the price collapses because there'll be an overrun of forestry credits. There's huge problems coming.
And all I'm saying is, I think that and look, this doesn't have to be a party political thing. I think this is a real problem, and it's one that wasn't foreseen. And we don't want to upset the apple cart for investors and the industry today. But going forward, we need to get ourselves into a different position about a decade from now. And so now is the time to start discussing this.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, cool. You may have already answered, it's on the same topic, but you said you're going to phase out forestry from New Zealand ETS and you're promoting planting the worst land into native forest. What about expanding that into planting native forest on our waterways as well?
Yeah, well, look, when I say the worst land, I mean the land where you are going to get the best environmental dividend. And that's not everywhere. That's in some places. So if you go back to my map with the hotspots, that was just for E. coli. But you can overlay that with sediment, with N, with P, with biodiversity, and there'll be some places which are just shouting out, we are so environmentally under pressure, we are the place that you should plant the stuff. So that's, it may well be. It may well be planting waterways. But look, the trouble is, what we've done to date is we've had these national regulations, and everyone's going to do everything. And so you go around New Zealand, you see good people spending a lot of time. Money's one thing, but it's just time. Farmers are busy anyhow. Time. I mean, I know myself, I'm planting gullies. It takes a lot of time doing stuff. And if somebody said to me, look, it's really nice what you've done, but honestly, it's not making much difference. Whereas up in that subcatchment there, we know that that's where there's a lot of sediment coming from. We know there's a particular problems that's really where we're going to be concentrating. You've got to do your bit, but the money is for up there. That makes a whole lot more sense to me.
Just one little statistic we heard the other day: 30% of the sediment that is in the Waikato River comes through the Waipara actually into the Waikato, comes from one or two subcatchments.
Subcatchments.
30%.
Thank you.
Yeah, forest, those are natives, you get a huge dividend.
Just going to double check your time constraints because I do know you've got other things as well.
No,
Anita's got us.
We're fine, but you may not be. So you cut us off.
We're fine, but
No,
what
we're
you're
fine.
saying we're over.
We're fine.
Another 10 minutes might be.
No.
I've let the next appointment know they may be a minute or two late.
Okay,
We're
sure.
being well looked after.
Oh, good. Okay, just double checking that. So yeah, just for our councillors, if you can keep your questions short-ish.
We'll keep our answers short too.
Or no, it's great. Quality is fantastic. So right, we got Councillor Scott. Sorry, I said then Wilson, and we're in Somerville if we get time. Oh, sorry, you're all done. Councillor Wilson.
Kia ora. Thank you. A breath of fresh air. Thank you very, very much. The only thing I haven't agreed with you on is about the water rights and the effect of agglomeration and while they and efficiency and what that means. And
Yep.
I'm really interested. I don't think we've got the time today to
No.
go into that, but I would really like to understand how that works because for me in this water area, sorry.
Oh, your mic's just not quite picking up your voice.
I'm just really interested in the same way as we talked over lunch, the tenure reviews caused a effect that we wouldn't, unintentional consequences.
Yep.
I think there's some really big, in water short areas, unintended consequences of agglomeration of water.
When we talk about efficiency, we are talking about efficiency in from a holistic perspective rather than a purely dollar perspective. So we're assuming that the environmental costs and benefits are included in that analysis. And I mean, I think on the agglomeration issues, there's ways to manage that sort of thing. I mean, ultimately, and we talk about this in the report. It's not in the it's a finer detail, but ultimately, as part of any sort of resolution of the water allocation issues, there's probably going to have to be some kind of resource rental or royalty to go into the system to actually allow over-allocated catchments to get bought back, right? You're going to need some mechanism like that, and so mechanisms like that really discourage hoarding because if you're holding on to water rights, you're going to be paying more. So there's you know, countervailing things that can be
But
put
look,
in
the
place.
short answer is, and we didn't go into vast detail. I could write a separate report on that and point out the pluses and the minuses. You wouldn't want to go into that with your eyes closed. You would want to do that very carefully. Māori will insist that we do anyhow if we wanted to. But you are absolutely right to raise that question mark. You're absolutely right to raise that question mark.
Yeah, it's an important one for our region,
Yeah,
with
I
some
know.
of the driest areas in the country and reliance on waters to sustain communities. Exactly, a fine balance. Going to the highest use at one point in time, can have ramifications for community, I guess. That's one to think about. I'm going to let others have asked their questions. So we got Councillor Ware, then Somerville.
Just talking about, I don't know if this is working. Yeah, making those decisions with the people who are going to be impacted by them and have to deal with that, particularly at a catchment level. At the scale that you're talking about, like whole-scale land use change, how do you incorporate the people who aren't necessarily currently impacted by that decision, but might be, like, so say you had a catchment that was particularly suited to, I don't know, oats or something, and then another catchment in a different area that was particularly suited to dairy, or was maybe a bit better suited to dairy, and you had basically the communities swapped over, and we're currently, farming something that didn't work on that land, but would work at that other land, and it was the other way around. How do you incorporate the people who, because if you're making a decision at that level, that community might be pretty entrenched in that industry, even if it's not suited for that land, and there might be another catchment where, how do you incorporate other people who could come in and work better with, and I don't know.
I think I know what you're saying, but I mean, remember this, that at the end of the day, you start with the people who are there, and it's their knowledge, and it's their personal circumstances and their businesses you're talking about. Now, people don't live in goldfish bowls. They tend to know what's happening, and they'll know someone who's into oats and someone who's into tulips and whatever, and often they won't take a lot of interest until actually they see evidence that the dollars and cents suggest that you could actually do that. And if you're under pressure on the environment, you need to change. Maybe I won't spend all of this money on trying to make what I'm doing work, I'll do something else. But one of the things that we say in the report is that one of the biggest stumbling blocks to change is basically it's the human knowledge side, it's capacity. I mean, people don't see themselves as a rural business person. I'm a dairy farmer, I'm a sheep farmer, I'm an arable cropping man, That's what I know. So thank you for telling me that tulips would be fantastic, but I don't know the first thing about tulips. And so if you were going to assist land use change, then you really have to think about how you invest in upskilling and sharing knowledge. And this is the biggest, one of the biggest and most important things. These things don't happen automatically, but come down a step from whole catchment changing. I mean, it's very unlikely a whole thing would go from oats to dairy and vice versa. But come back a bit. I think this is, because we've heard farmers saying this, and not just one part of New Zealand. If you know that you've got quite a problem and you need to take out a hunk of whatever the stressor is, we've heard people saying, well, listen, the best thing would be to buy out X and Y and Z and just retire that. Turn it into a wetland or whatever. And these are people who live there saying that. If push comes to shove, and for some people it might be at the right stage of their lives actually to take up that offer. Money's got to come from somewhere. They're not going to walk off for free. But that is the stuff which I think you can only really understand at the level of the community. And one of the things people said to us last night, and it's absolutely true, because we were saying, well, would you make it compulsory to belong? How would you run this? Because we haven't come to a view about that. And they said, yeah, well, you still have to live in the community, and you're still seeing people at the golf club, and the kids are at school and so on and so forth. So it's got to work at a human level. But all I can say is the more I look at what we've tried to do over the last couple of decades, which is trying to make rules and pass them down to regional councils, and then regional councils get stuck in sort of 10 years of legal challenges and debate about, you know, I think we can do it better. We don't have to keep trying to do it the same way.
I guess, yeah, the short answer is time. You know,
time.
How quickly do you want to make this transition? If you try and do something quickly, it's going to be bloody hard.
Councillor Sunwell.
Thanks. Look, I'm interested to explore something you had in your report where you wrote, most environmental impacts on land use activities do not currently appear as costs in the production process, yet they should. Conversely, the activities landowners undertake to improve the environment should be rewarded economically, yet generally they're not. How could you see that might play out locally or regionally, for example?
Well, if you read the chapter on the report, which goes through some of the economic tools, they range, I mean, the easiest thing always is to spend public money. So, okay, you're providing all these ecosystem services, no one's recognising it, so here's a cheque. I mean, you know, so just find the person who's going to write the cheque. I mean, money is a very, very easy lubricant. The question is how you get that money. I've given you one. It's an idea of, you know, using ETS proceeds to do this stuff. We look at some even raunchier suggestions. One came from Dr. Michael Cullen's tax review, and that is a land use intensity tax. I can see that would be politically interesting to institute. But, I mean, something has to come from somewhere. But I think we've got to move to a position, and this is happening, where if people leave land the way it is rather than develop it, or even perhaps pull back, they're paid money for providing some services. All around the world, there are, you know, well-established examples of big cities whose basic water supply rely on the land staying the way it is and not being further polluted and so on and so forth. And they are paying money. So rather than paying for a huge, great concrete tank and all of that hard infrastructure, they're paying for soft infrastructure. And so, you know, in parts of New Zealand, stuff which isn't valued right now, with stormwater, with flood management, all of these things becoming more and more important, it may well be that a green solution is cheaper than a concrete solution. And so you start to pay for those services. So again, I don't think it's a question of sitting down and designing a brilliant new tax or a brilliant new this to do it. I think we need to look for opportunities to establish the fact that the land provides services, and not removing those services is a valuable contribution, and someone who's benefiting from that should pay for it.
I guess I'm sort of thinking whether we can start thinking about, in the long term, how we might incorporate some of those principles into our rating systems. There's some food for thought for some people.
Particularly as you start getting satellite imagery.
It's a lot to think about in that. We've got you on a time limit. We've got Councillor Malcolm here wishing to ask a question. Thanks.
It's probably how you see getting some of these actions underway is probably what I'm heading to really. And sitting in Ranfurly on Friday with a group from the Maniatoto who were celebrating the year of catchment work and the exceptional work that they're doing without a land and water plan that's been put in, but they're getting out there and they're doing the actions, and they're just so passionate and driven for their environment, and it's exceptional. But one farmer there said, simply give us strong, robust figures of our baseline and tell us where we need to head. So and I look at also in the Menuhira Care, where the catchment groups there have evolved over the last 4 or 5 years, and there's people afoot and going so strong and getting the work done and wanting to do the work and driving towards the goals. But how do we drive to get this national, because I just think that's absolutely superb. So if you've done nothing else in your report, and a lot of it's really good, but I think that's a real key to it, that we've got a national monitoring system and a figure that we've got. How do we drive towards that, Simon?
I agree. Well, I mean, you know, I'm recommendatory. So as I said to the Matara people when I first went down there to start this exercise, I said, now look, this will be pretty confronting. You know, it's going to show some pretty challenging facts. But I said there's one good thing. Don't jump out the window. I'm only the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. No one has to listen to me. And that's true. I can only make recommendations. So, in a sense, my easy get-out-of-jail-free card answer to you is, well, look, how can we? I can write the report. It's up to you to convince people to do this stuff. But look, the information thing, I mean, I think you as a council, I think regional councils are the key here. You really have to start insisting that central government takes this information issue seriously. That, as you say, people want a baseline. Right now, we know that the data we have is inadequate. It is not up to the task. Doesn't mean we don't do anything waiting for perfection, but there's a lot that could be done to make this an easier ask. Now, one of the things I am aware of is that if we just use if Landcare goes off and does what it does with the soil and NIWA with water the way they've done it for years, it will take forever and be very, very expensive. But there are a raft of new sensing technologies and remote technologies, AI, which can actually crunch huge chunks of data in different ways and help us get more data. And I'm actually running a project right now, I hope the report will be out next year, to say to government, not only am I telling you we need better data to put you in the position as a regional council where you can talk turkey much more confidently, but I'm not saying it will cost you a bomb, because there are technologies which you should be taking the lead on, which can help. And I'm thinking of some of the remote sensing technologies. There's stuff out there which can change the game completely, and we're not using it in some cases. So watch the space. I've got more to say on it. That's coming.
Also, just one thing you say at the end of the report, Simon, is we're not going to big bang transition to this new system. We need to experiment. The government, if the government's interested in this, it needs to trial.
Yeah. And
Otago could put its hand up and say, we want to trial this idea. Will you work with us, government?
My advice, I've made this very clear. I've said this to the ministers. Listen, I'm not suggesting that you should do this across the country everywhere tomorrow. We've got this idea. We always seem to pass an act and try and push it across the whole country. Look, we need to experiment. If you think we're looking through the wrong end of the telescope, we should come right back to the people who are being asked to accept the change and start there. Then one of the things you might do is choose. The coward would go and choose the easy bit where they're pretty close to their targets and you can meet it and a little bit of money and it all looks great. I'd choose the most difficult catchments in New Zealand, and I'd do an experiment. Now, the Mataura, for instance, is well placed. They've got 21 catchment groups. The entire catchment's covered. So they're well set up to take a lead. Now, there will be others in New Zealand where you might want to experiment with this, and you'll learn a lot doing it. You'll find that some things won't work and some things will work. I think we've got to be much, much more experimental about how we do some of this environmental stuff. Got to listen to the people who actually... Most people in New Zealand feel that the environment gets done to them. Environmental regulation gets done to them, rather than environmental regulation is something that they are part of creating, enforcing and making work. And that's a big change.
And something that we embrace strongly as well and have done in regional councils throughout the country is catchment approaches. And for example, in Otago, we had the very first national model on integrated catchment management in the Tairi catchment. Yes. And from there, we've had a long history of environmental work with catchment groups, and is the way, obviously, that plans are structured with catchment action planning and all of that type of work. We are right there on that one. Right there on state of environment reporting is a broad scale approach, and we need a fine scale approach if we are able to look at issues and at solutions, and that's costly. And councils have been doing that in an investigatory manner, but can only prioritise, as you say, catchment by catchment to do that, but that's a start. Capturing all of that info that we have been doing is going to be really helpful. Fantastic to have you here today. I personally wasn't sure whether we were presenting that the future of the country is highest value land use, which potentially is dairy, would be needing to help to then offset with some forestry, and would be helping to, I guess, through funding its costs, enable other land uses to be able to exist, because we're a very diverse region. Dairying's is part of it, but we've actually got quite a lot of extensive and different types of land use that goes on as well, and I just wasn't sure where those types fit in your report. So it'd be interesting to hear more about that too.
We are keen to come back and talk to the community.
Yeah, we're planning to do that. We came here today in part to listen to you, which we enjoyed very much over lunch, and we're going to go meet some more people this afternoon. And so we're here to actually gather up stuff, but we will come back.
Awesome, that would be great. We'd love to have further conversation, but we've absolutely valued this chance to hear from you firsthand today, and we've gained a whole lot from that. That was absolutely wonderful, so thank you so much.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take an adjournment at this point, if we get a mover and a seconder for that, till 2:45, is that right? Yep, thank you. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Noon. All in favour, aye. Thank you very much. Oh, nearly. Just double checking we're all good on the sound. Yep, okay. Well, welcome back everyone. We'll get underway then. We are still actually at pretty much the start of our agenda with confirming the minutes of the 26th of June. Does somebody care to move those as true and accurate? Councillor Mepham, seconded Councillor Wilson, all in favour. Aye. Against, carried. Actions, they are there, and they're all looking good. I was just looking at the first three where the timetable is actually different from what we initially laid out. So there's clear progress there, but the due date is recorded as, say, the 26th of the 7th, and we know that we're not going to meet that one, and same with the next one, and same with the third one. Whether or not we actually should change the due date, because I don't think we had a resolution with that due date. So we just maybe have a think about how the style of how we present these actions, but yeah, we're all on track otherwise, I think. Does anyone else have anything on actions? I'm not seeing anything there. Okay, so we're on to our reports. 9.1 is the Chair's report. So yeah, a few different events there. It was great to get to go to Dream South D Open Day. Great to see that organisation with 5 years funding there, looking at some good work which is relevant to Regional Council around urban environment. There's some planting and enhancement work, but also getting people around, and transport's part of that as well. Just making South Dunedin an even better place to live, and yeah, really open location right in the middle of South Dunedin, with its own little place where people can pop in whenever they want. So that's pretty cool. I was very fortunate to represent our council at the Matariki celebrations at Treble Cone, and a huge thank you to Kai Tahu and the government for that opportunity. That was an amazing event, and wonderful for our region to be able to host that, and 4 hours of televised coverage as well. Amazing. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to represent you all. Met the Vice-Chancellor of the University at an event. Yeah, went to the Mackenzie country and yeah, was invited by ECAN, who were hosting Minister Hoggard. Libby had the chance to talk about Wilding Pines on behalf of the regional sector right across New Zealand, obviously. So that was really great that Libby is seen in the light that she was asked to represent everyone. And yeah, great chance to hear where we're at with funding for those programs, particularly wilding trees. That's, yeah, a little bit concerning that we haven't got, well, more than a little bit concerning that we haven't got funding budgeted to maintain the programs that we had in place, and that we're likely to be going backwards in that area rather than forwards. So great to have the collaboration of ECAN there, and also the regional sector, as we just make a push for the case there that we know there's such a huge benefit versus cost to acting. Yep, so if there's any questions, I'll just grab them at the end. Went to Lake Hayes Jobs for Nature funding program celebration at the end of the Jobs for Nature funding, which Mana Tahuna had organised. a big turnout of groups from that area and a great chance to catch up with lots of people. And there's, still ongoing work in that area, which is great to see as well. I have been heavily involved in work around, post the bus hub tragedy, and working with DCC and police to get that joint inner city safety group up and going, and just operationally working to bring buses back into the stop and to think about the area into the future and what we can do as a council as well. So quite a bit of work going on there. Presented to the select committee on the RM reform bill, and that seemed to go pretty well. We got Joanna Gilroy and I presented, and Joanna was there to support with questions. And we did receive quite a lot of questions. They were really good ones. It gave us an opportunity to talk about our intensive winter grazing program and consenting, how that worked. What else did we get? Joanna probably remembers some of the other questions, but there were a number of questions around how Otago was currently working and the costs of consenting and things like that. So technically pretty interested in how Te Mana o Te Wai would be considered when we have it in our regional policy statement. So there were quite a bit of interest in that point as well, and whether it would need to be considered at the consenting stage anyway, because that it's essentially in our plans. Gave them something to think about. And just a couple of thank you letters, and then our letter that went through to Minister Hogarth, was it? Yep, in relation to the Regional Pest Management Plan, which operational plan reporting, which we're required to do. Are there any questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, cool. It's about the bus hub and the progress that's being made there, but just reflecting on the situation, 1 or 2 years ago the Ministry of Education used to run the buses, school buses, where typically a pupil would go from the school to their destination home or whatever in a direct situation, and that obviously ceased. So pupils now hop on a public bus, they go via the bus hub before they get to home. So we brought all the pupils together. So just reflecting on that, is there how much has the ceasing of the Ministry of Education's responsibility contributed to the tensions at the bus hub? Just understanding that and reflecting on that. Has that ever come up for discussion?
It regularly comes up for discussion, and no doubt Richard would like to comment on that one. I guess, challenges in Dunedin with the fact that students often are free to go to any school across Dunedin, so they move in all sorts of angles, I guess, to get to their school, so it's not a clear pathway to schools as well sometimes.
But for the majority, might go from a particular, for example, if I went to King's and I lived in Portobello, I might hop on a bus and go to Portobello, whereas now I'd go to the bus hub and then go to Portobello.
Yep, it's
and I sense that because that happens, that there's potentially an increase of tension. Could be wrong. I mean, it's a question.
So
has that been a wise decision?
Look, I can't comment on whether it's a wise decision or not. There is a Ministry of Education policy around school buses, and so they do. It's a very old policy. Still refers to miles. That gives you an indication of how old it is. So it does mean that we have because of the model we run with buses, where we do run them in and out of the hub, which is known to be the best model, that we are. There is a situation where numerous students are in there at those peak times, as well as the fact it's a busy part of town anyway. So Yes, it has come up in discussions. There won't be, I could say confidently that there will not be a shift from the Ministry of Education in terms of that policy and bringing those back in. Though, if anything, they'll be looking where they do have existing services to work with public transport providers to actually move away from it altogether and make it part of a network that might be subsidised by the Ministry. So there's probably some changes coming the other way. We do have services that operate within the public transport network that are specifically for schools. They're not on our standard routes. They're public services and anyone can catch them, but they're very much targeted at students to be able to pick them up from the gate and take them on routes we knew used to be popular. So we have over time...
Not via the bus hub? Or?
No.
Okay.
No, so there's some of those. So one, as this inner city safety group is established, one of the work streams that will fall out will clearly relate specifically to the bus hub and bus services. And we know through communication that the schools are all very keen to talk about bus services for students. So there'll be some further investigation, but I guess I would just... My advice is that we won't see the Ministry stepping back into that space. We're going to have to work with the schools to try and think about what the best service is for their students and what other things we might be able to put in place to ensure there's safety for students that are using the services.
Cool. I'm comforted that there's an awareness and there's discussion and some evolution there. Thank you.
No further questions? Okay, recommendation is to note the report. Somebody care to move that? Councillor Forbes, seconded Councillor Noon, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 9.2, Chief Executive's report.
Thanks, Gretchen. So I get what's not on the report, but I will take the chance. Just we had a new executive start on the 1st of July, and it's good to see they're all here today, so that's a good start. All familiar faces, and really great to be able to promote internally for our staff, and I've got a lot of confidence in the team we've assembled, so I'll just take this chance to formally welcome them. Obviously welcome back Anita, Nick and Amanda, and welcome Tom and Tammy and Joe formally, who has been an acting role, onto that team, and I know that they are looking forward to working closely with the council. In terms of the report itself, it's as it has been in previous iterations. The only flag in there is we are currently pulling together the end of year, end of June financial and performance measures. I haven't included them in draft because as soon as they go into a report, even if they've got draft on them, they'll become the real thing and be reported on. So they will be reported to finance, which I think is in a couple of weeks, as end of year results. So they'll come through either through Kevin or Tim, who's chairing that next finance meeting. So I have left them out just because those end of year results are important. It's important if we put them in a public report that they are the final version. So they're not in this one. But an update on the Land and Water Plan program is, and obviously the long-term plan has now been signed off and is going through its final throes with audit, and you'll be very pleased to see that we'll be coming back very soon to talk about the annual plan program. So we'll get
excited.
straight back into it.
The year, will it?
We had our first discussion, that executive leadership team, on Monday about the annual plan program, which I couldn't quite get my head around, but that will be coming back very soon, and we'll be back into the planning cycle. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions then? Fairly, Councillor Wilson.
Only because you've raised the annual plan and understanding the work report onwards with some of those big projects like the Environment Fund.
Yes.
I mean, look, count yourself lucky you're not the DCC, having to do a 9-year plan.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we've actually made your job really hard with the annual plan, with some of those things like that and rates review. And I suppose the question then is when those things start getting into our agenda and understanding their pipeline in this sort of report,
yes.
I suppose.
Yep. So there are, we've identified those resolutions that were specific to the annual plan, and one of them was around public transport targeted rates, and then there were a few other things decided through the long-term plan that will have an impact on year 2 onwards. So we'll bring those back through, and some of those that turn into significant projects will be added to this list as other things drop out. So very aware of that, and we know we've got some work to do around review of environmental funding and the use of that new the new fund alongside the existing million or so that we give out, and then there were public transport targeted rates. We've got the flood and drainage rating review program that we need to get underway, which won't all be done for the annual plan, but we'll bring back a plan that tells you how we're looking to approach that. Community liaison group, there's a report coming in August, so there's a few of those things that will start to roll through and feed into that annual plan.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, page 26, and it's on the overdue Maori economy report completed by IRC and iwi, which again has in progress, but further down I see we've gone ahead and done a second draft of the section 32, which is subject. Yes, so where actually is that, and how do we?
Yep.
I know the answer to that as well, but yeah, Nita.
So we had an agreement with iwi that they would provide the Māori economy report in conjunction with their clause 4A feedback. That feedback closes, I think, later in August, and will be fed into the section 32.
You got that, Councillor Malcolm?
I have. So how can that then be reflected in our section 32 then? Because I thought section 32 was...
Anita's just grabbing the mic,
Yep, the section 32 can't be complete until after the clause 4A consultation is received, so that's the last step, so that's how we can incorporate it.
So it can be drafted and
Yep.
and then obviously be added to once we get that 4A feedback.
Thank you.
Thanks, good question, Councillor Malcolm. We received that report in governance group, but yeah, good question. Any other questions? No, it appears not. So noting the report again is the recommendation. Somebody care to move that? Councillor Weir, seconded Councillor Somerville. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 10.1 is Upper Lakes ICG appointment. So yeah, we've got a few jobs to do here. We're looking at endorsing the boundary, which has been discussed and essentially consulted on. Appoint recommended list of members, appoint a councillor, and endorse the terms of reference. So I'm thinking that, I have heard from one councillor that they would like to be considered for the appointment, and that's Councillor Forbes, who's actually been attending these meetings and is from this area, obviously, as the one of the elected representatives for the Dunstan constituency. So I'd imagine that you may want to leave the room at some point, but it seems reasonable that for the bulk of the discussion that if anyone else would like to be considered, they're welcome to.
Do you want that nomination now, or?
That might be helpful. Would that help? Well, yeah, that's one way of doing it. We could,
Take questions first around the
Yeah,
paper generally,
that's a good
and
idea.
then when someone puts all 4 motions,
Thanks.
put that forward, and that would then just allow Alexa to be involved in the questions.
Yeah, that's one.
And if anyone else wanted to put themselves forward as well. Councillor Wilson, have you got a question on procedure?
It is. Because I thought we'd sort of already done this with Gary, and it doesn't worry me who does it. And it's just, I thought this was one that
Councillor
we'd already
Callagher is online.
Yeah.
So he has an opportunity to put himself forward formally now as well.
But hadn't we already done that, is the question? Because I thought we had allotted...
And I can tell you that it's a slightly different process.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, sorry. Apologies for cutting in, Councillor Wilson. Gary Kelleher was nominated and accepted that for the ICM working group. This is now a nomination for the Upper Lakes Integrated Catchment Group.
Yep. I think that you might have had a talk to each other as well.
Yeah,
so,
we
yeah,
have had a
just
chat.
on the quiet. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's fine.
Yeah,
I'm not Gary,
yeah.
but and if Gary wants
But
to speak to that, but I don't know if he does. But
Councillor-
we've had a chat about it.
Oh, that's okay, that's
Yeah.
fine, I just
Yeah.
want to understand.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's confusing.
Oh, here he is.
Councillor Callaghan. Yeah, we'll introduce the paper and we just want to make sure that we get that no conflicts of interest arise, but yeah, we should be okay. We're going to introduce the paper, Councillor Callaghan, if that's okay, and we'll just come back to the firstly appointment of a councillor rep, and whoever wants to leave the room or be involved in that consideration can do so.
So you'll do that bit first.
Yeah. Good idea, Councillor
Sure, you're
Malcolm,
doing
on
the
that. We're
question.
just going to introduce the that's fine. And any questions? Libby, we're in your hands, and we've got Joe in the room at the front of the, in front of us anyway, at the little table. So, if you'd like to introduce the paper and run us through anything we need to know here.
Thank you. Anna's going to do the introduction for the paper.
Great. Perfect.
Thanks very much, Libby. Thank you. As you know, the ICM program has been rolling out catchment action plan development, the first one being the Catlins. We're now ready to start that development process for the Upper Lakes. This paper enables us to get going through looking at the boundary, confirming the boundary, appointing members to an integrated catchment group to help develop that catchment action plan, and to just confirm the terms of reference for that integrated catchment group, and of course nominate an ORC representative for that group. I'd also like to take the opportunity to introduce to you Simone Langhans, who is our catchment action planner in the ICM team. She'll be the catchment action planner responsible for facilitating that development of the catchment action plan in the Upper Lakes, along with Renee Pearson, who's a catchment action analyst, who's not here today, but Simone was instrumental in helping draft this paper as well. So over to questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions then on the paper? Councillor Weir.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to ask how that would impact how a boundary change would impact the neighbouring catchment action plan or ICM group.
Oh, that's interesting.
And if they had a say in
that's
that.
a good question. The neighbouring area, in terms of developing catchment action plan for, is a little way off, and of course it would mean that area would be affected in the way that it would be quite significantly smaller, and we would cross that bridge when we come to it. One of the options would of course be to have from the QLDC boundary down the remainder of that Dunstan FMU or Rohe rolled into the Roxburgh Rohe to make it a more significant workable area for a catchment action plan.
Sorry, could you just repeat what that neighbouring catchment was?
Dunstan?
Dunstan, yeah. Okay.
Oh, it's Upper Lakes, Dunstan, Roxburgh, I believe. That's off the top of my head, sorry. Got that wrong.
Councillor Mepham.
Just in regards to the online survey that was done, you got 39 submissions received, 34 preferred the QLDC boundary. Is that number of submissions being received a good indication to go by? I mean, how many would you have been expecting for a really good return?
Did you want to answer this one?
Well, we think it's quite a good return. We had about 30 people joining the online Hui, which we conducted, and so with the 39 replies we actually got more replies than from the people who attended the Hui. So we thought that was quite a good return actually, and quite indicative of the opinions that we have scouted out before.
So to clarify that, it was a targeted survey, targeted those people who were invited to the online Hui.
Okay. That's
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Yep, sounds like a good return rate then. Any other questions, Councillor Malcolm, then Somerville?
Well, yeah, just going back to the boundaries, so I just wonder why we hadn't considered that boundary under the Land and Water Regional Plan, but so we haven't done that. So how does the area outside the QLDC boundary now get looked after, and what does that do to the vision statements within the Land and Water Plan? What does it do to the vision statements and the timeframes around target attribute states and the likes within that?
Anita is grabbing the mic again behind you.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry with my back to
No
you.
worries.
Yeah, so it doesn't impact the vision or what's in the Land and Water Plan. I think one of the benefits of the program that Libby's team is running is they can choose any scale and area they want, and this one works for the community. And the key that we've always said with these programs is they need to work together. So the Land and Water Plan will pick up some things in some areas, and the ICM work will pick up others in a different area. But it won't impact what's in the plan and what needs to be achieved in terms of the Land and Water Plan.
So subsequent question to that. So could that, if there is vast differences within that come out of this work, would we look in time to realign the Land and Water Plan boundaries then?
Potentially.
Yeah.
But it would need to be through a plan change or a variation.
Yeah, or the next review or whatever we do, but
absolutely.
It's not. It's not going to penalise one area positively or negatively in actions they may have to do, because it's going to be adjusted to the catchment.
And the other thing that we've always said is at some point we'd like the regulatory tool to be more granular, but we're not in a position to do that, and this would be one of the ways that you could do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Somerville.
Thanks. Look, could we have an update on where we are with the Lakes Management Working Group, as it seems the work of that group will connect with what we're talking about here?
Yep. So I can give you, so the Deep Lakes, which is called a Deep Lakes Working Group, so around the three deep lakes within that Queenstown Lake area. So that's really more of a technical science group, and that's focused on, it was actually came about due to a letter from the Parliamentary Commission of the Environment, you'll recall, asking what the various agencies responsible for the health of those lakes were doing, and what was recognised as some more specific work needed to be done on the information we hold on those three deep lakes. So there has been a group formed, and we've got Chair Robertson, Councillor McCall, Councillor Laws and Councillor Forbes on that group, along with Edward Allison, and then MFE, myself and Department of Conservation. There's a technical advisory group that's been formed, which includes a number of science expertise or science experts from a range of different organisations who have all either done some work on those deep lakes or are planning to, or have the skills necessary to fill some of those gaps. And that work program is just getting underway. There's a couple of papers that will come to committee in December. There'll be an update on the health of the deep lake, which you'll remember that Hugo has reported previously, and also an update on the work that's being undertaken by that technical advisory group through the Deep Lakes Working Group. So they're separate in that Deep Lakes Working Group is very much around the data and information we hold and identifying where those gaps are and starting to fill those gaps, but some of that information will make its way through to this program and some of the actions that might be taken by the community.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to those reports later in the year.
Councillor Malcolm.
Oh, yeah, just a further one, now we'll solve that one. You've got on page 34, the ULICG will make effective recommendations to council. This is under the terms of reference. So will they not be just making recommendations? Because how do we know they're effective? I just want what was the rationale behind that wording? And I'm not doubting that those good people will make things that will ultimately turn out to be effective, but...
You have it? No, I'm sorry, I haven't got page numbers.
We could probably just get rid of effective, perhaps. Yeah.
And just in the same vein, and again, I think what you've put together is really good, but then you've got further down under what is a catchment action plan. So you've got successful CAPs are designed by iwi, the community and stakeholders for their place. So so what if I said, could you give me an example and proof of that statement? Or are we hoping that?
Has everyone got the statement? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Cool. Sorry.
And again, probably I'd have to say I think will be a true statement in time, but I'm just wondering, because we actually haven't had one yet, or we've got one starting. I know that's, yeah.
That is a very, very good question. You're quite right. It probably does get a bit ahead of ourselves. It's based on a fair bit of research that's been done in various parts around the world, and regardless of a planning project or on-the-ground project, there's a lot of evidence to show if they're not co-designed or co-owned by the people in that area, they tend to potentially start very well and fail later, or just don't have that cohesive, collaborative intent to continue. So it is somewhat presumptive, but it is based on evidence in other parts of the world and experience here in New Zealand.
If there's some alternative wording that you would prefer, we're happy to take that and add it in.
I'm probably happy that someone like a Mr. Upton examining if this work is effective, the first thing I'd be asking for is, can you give me an example of that? And we just simply can't at this stage.
So yeah, not in a Targo context, but we could probably remove the successful out of that statement and just CAPs are designed by those groups. So I think that's probably a potential solution.
So my suggestion to deal with those couple of suggestions is when we get to the recommendations under recommendation D, we'll just say endorses the draft terms of reference with minor changes, and we'll just pick those up.
Yep, absolutely comfortable. Yep.
Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions, Councillor Weir?
I've forgotten now.
Oh, okay. That's all good. Sorry. You were tentatively putting your hand up. I was a bit too quick. Okay, we will then perhaps move on. We're going to slowly. It's all good. We're going to move on. There we go. Yeah, it's always the way. Councillor Weir.
I was just going to ask about a note that QLGC, their 3 nominations are all staff rather than elected members, whereas we're going with an elected member for our representative. I don't think that's necessarily a conflict that needs to be resolved, but just wanted to check that was something that they were aware of, that we were nominating an elected member rather than a staff member, and if there was any conflict there or anything.
So the question is, were they aware that that's what is going to be happening in terms of joining the group?
So I think the question there, Anna or Libby, is how were Kia ora sent? Was it a specific invitation, or did we just leave it with them to decide, which it is really their call as to how they manage it?
The latter. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, we had spoken with them through a meeting pre all this to explain the intent, the purpose, where we're going, how it's been working with captains. And then following the hui that we held, wrote to them, to the contacts we had, and asked them to nominate. So it's up to them.
Thank you.
And it's reflective of the Catlins group, where there's a Clutha District Council staff member on that group and not an elected member.
Right. But that's not necessarily how it would be for every catch.
It's up to them to decide. Yep. We just invite the council, in general. Yep, good one. Looks like we've finished questions then, so we'll get to the first part then of our recommendations, which is around our council nominee.
So I'll stand back and come over and sit in public area or out of the room.
Only if someone moves.
I have to move.
I'd like to nominate Alexa for this position.
Seconder, Councillor Scott. Are there any other? Well, no, we need to deal with the Yeah, we need to deal with this one first, actually. That's absolutely correct. Yep. So I'll put it all in favour. Aye. Against. Carried. Yep.
And we didn't count your vote.
No, I would bet.
Good one. Rightio. So now then, Alexa, you are free to be involved in the rest of the what are currently recommendations. Right, so the first one then there is around endorsing the scope boundary for the Upper Lakes CAP as the QLDC boundary. Does somebody want to move that one?
I'm happy to move them all, the three
Yep.
of them.
You're happy to move them all, does that? Yeah. They're quite yeah.
Yeah, A, B and D.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Just
the,
noting
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Just noting, we'll make that slight amendment to D
Yeah.
to capture the edit.
Happy to second.
Okay, great. Well done, everyone. That should be quicker. All in favour then?
Can I just say something before?
Oh, sure, sorry. I totally
That's
forgot
okay.
about the debate
I know,
part,
I'm
which
not- I
is
don't
quite
wanna hold
important.
anything up, but
You're absolutely welcome to.
I
yep.
just want to thank Anna and her team because they managed to get this immense list of everybody involved in various catchment works and get that out there. And we had that really constructive meeting. And one of our people on here, Matt Hollier, had said that, that if we'd been in touch with everyone, and we went through the list, and he went through the list, and you'd been in touch with everyone. So that was a really, really good process, and there's some really good people involved in that group, so I'm really looking forward to being part of it. And I've had several people contact me and with thanks for you, Anna, and the work you've done on this, and your team, so thank you very much.
I'll just echo those words as well. When I was at Lake Hayes for the Manatahuna get-together recently, where there is about 100 people, I'd say, there from the area, and spoke to many people who said the same thing about the process today. It's been great, and our people are fantastic, and yes, your name came up more than once there, Anna, so yeah, well done.
Cool.
Okay, Councillor Weir.
I just wanted to quickly add that the new website, the new pages for the ICMs, we've got the Catlins one on there and the Upper Lakes are also looking really good. The maps on there were very helpful for understanding the different boundary options for today, and there's some good info on there, so it'll be good to see those sort of take shape as the catchment groups take on the work. Good. Anyone else want to say something before we put the motion? No? Okay then, well I am going to put all of those three motions, and you're all clear what you're voting on. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks team online as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. 10.2 is the adoption of the draft Otago Southland Regional Land Transport Plan. So just having a changeover of presenters here. Welcome to Lorraine. The author of this report was Nick Sargent, I think, but we have Lorraine here in person today helping with this report. Which is fantastic, and also Kate Wilson, the chair of and deputy chair as well, and Alexa Forbes. So yeah, we've got a room rich in knowledge on this particular topic. So Lorraine, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I don't have a presentation on the paper. I'm just here to, as you know, support the RTC reps and to just talk council through. There's obviously an option to not adopt the LTP, but we're strongly recommending not to do that. The process is we went out for consultation. The draft was prepared. The RTC's approved it. We consulted. We extended the consultation period for this one because there were, to recognise the sort of the difficulties during the process where we had two draft GPS's, government policy statements, two very different ones from before the elections and then after the elections, and then finally the final one. So the extended consultation enabled, in particular, the Transport Agency as the road controlling authority to amend its program, and now we need to adopt it and submit it as a whole to the New Zealand Transport Agency as the funding authority to have it for inclusion in the National Land Transport Program. We need to submit it by the 1st of August, and then the NZTA will adopt its National Land Transport Program in September, and at that point in time we will know what activities we have a good indication on funding for. We've already had an indication on what we call our continuous program, which is part of the RLTP for us and then for all of the territorial authorities. And then what we're looking for now is advice or the inclusion of our what we call our improvements and our low cost, low risk program. So low cost, low risk, some of the activities that we put in the LTP for trials. You could spend up to $2 million over the first 3 years, the NLTP period, and low cost, low risk. And then improvements are the activities that we've included for our public transport investments, particularly in Queenstown, which exceed $2 million. And we'll have a final indication on those in September. I guess the implication is until we do that, anything that we do to move forward on our low cost, low risk and our improvements program, we are slightly risking getting final funding approval in that period of time. We're not planning to do any of that, but we would be if we did. Yeah.
I think it's appropriate at this point if Councillor Wilson would like to say something as the chair of the committee, given that it's been endorsed by your committee.
Oh, thank you. And it was a pleasure serving on the Hearings Committee, which sat in Dunedin and in Invercargill, and passionate people about connections and how transport is important in the area. I think the one thing, and I like the last comment about the risk of investing now, while this looks like it should involve all of the land transport projects, what is not sitting in here is both coastal shipping and Kiwi Rail investment and, in fact, dock. And those investments also will potentially get some money out of that pie. So the issues are really substantial, and every council is looking for more money and the need for more investment. And while they're looking like they may get some, unfortunately the inflationary costs on some of this in these fields are substantial and are causing huge increases in costs. So while it looks like substantial increases, potentially they may not be able to do as much as they want to do and need to do, given the real risk is bridges and some fairly substantial programs that are all coming to the end of life. So, what we've also included in there, the GPS, the staff have been fabulous because the GPS has been something that's been moving during this period, and it's been really hard to set policy, and thank you for the extension so that we could get into a better space. But it's also noted that we've got some priority projects in here that will not fit into the GPS, but have been included in here in order that should other infrastructure funding become available, their priority can be noted as part of the funding streams, so that they help some of those projects as well. So it's a fairly high level document in some ways at the front end, and the details in the back in the actual work programs. Hopefully what people will be able to understand what the investments are in a better nuance than they have in the past. We're always getting better at that. And I think if I look over to Andrew Noon, who sat on this committee many long years ago, it's probably a much more readable document and understandable at a community level now than and that is great because it means that we're getting that engagement at the community level. Anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, and a big thank you to the committee and you and Alexa for representing our council on that and for all the work that you've done through hearings as well. Really, really appreciate it. Councillor Forbes, did you want to add to that at all?
Just that I think it's worth acknowledging Environment Southland as well, who we've worked together with, and it's been incredibly difficult to do because of the changing nature of the GPS. And Lorraine from our end and Russell from Environment Southland end have actually done a huge amount of work navigating a changing landscape, which has been really tricky. And there's a lot of stuff in there which is still this moving feast that we don't really understand. But I think it well represents the way we're trying to look forward in an agreed fashion between our two regions, and we're working together on that, and the government should at least be able to see where we want to go and how we want to do that. So from that perspective, it's a good document despite the couple of typos you might have picked up. Councillor Malcolm, thank you.
Thank you very much. There are some questions, but yeah, there's a quite important change to the recommendation C to add in the word Otago on that one, because at the moment it's saying Southland Regional Land Transport Plan, but I'm sure you've all noticed that. Councillor Scott, you were first.
Cool, thank you. Thank you to everybody that's been involved in this really comprehensive document. My question is just, as a layperson, or as a councillor, just trying to understand how central government policy has helped shape any changes in this document, and also at a district level, how we land up where we land and whether the districts are happy. It's quite interesting when you look at it. For example, I don't know whether it's coincidental or not, but local road maintenance in Queenstown Lakes and in Waitaki and in Clutha is all about $20 million a year plus an incremental increase. Yeah, so government policy, has it had an influence? District councils, are they happy? How did you land up where you landed with that type of financial allocation? Thank you.
Yep, so I'll try and answer that. So yeah, I think the government policy is really clear and has been spoken about. It changed a lot from pre the election.
Yeah.
So they set out clearly the priorities. The draft GPS that came out post the election couldn't have been more clear about what, if not the whole government, at least the new Minister of Transport's priorities are very clear, and there's a significant component of that which is went into what's called the pothole prevention, and that's ultimately where the policy influences, because the GPS sets out the, if you like, the funding buckets.
And the
based
GPS,
on what the
we've used it a number of times, the GPS.
Yes, government policy statement on land transport.
Cool, thank you.
And as Councillor Wilson noted, we had coastal shipping in. It came out in the second draft.
Okay.
It's gone back in again, and that's quite important for some of the concerns that both the committee and I think the wider South Island has in terms of resilience in the transport network. But certainly having a big bucket of funding like the pothole prevention, which was for local roads and state highways, did help a lot of the territorial authorities, but some of them weren't able, because of the late change, to match it with their, what we call their local share. So the proportion that they could rate to access the funding. That's always the other issue.
Yes.
We're trying to balance that. And I think the big change in policy, which did cause a little bit of extra work to moderate the programs, the plans, the programs, the spend that we've got in, I guess, what you call the back end, was with the new direction in the draft GPS, which new draft GPS, so under the coalition-led government, which has stepped back a little bit in the final. There was a lot of things that are importance to the community and we're submitted on around connectivity and choice, being future focused, more sustainable transport options that initially had more of a focus in the first draft GPS, didn't in the middle, people submitted on it, and I think the final GPS, which came out right at the end, gives a little bit more scope, but we still need to see where the whole program lands for how much funding there'll be available.
Yeah, cool. And that, just answering the final question, Madam Chair, was like, are the district councils, are they individually happy? Are they all bought into this?
They're all happy, and that they've all bought into it.
Yeah.
I think the point is that everybody always wants more money, so that's going
No
to...
one's happy.
I think it's important...
Okay, well, are they all happy or nobody's happy?
We're all evenly unhappy.
I think it's important to realise that it represents what they have put in their long-term plan.
Okay.
And so that's why we delayed it, so that we could get all of that data, so that's what it reflects they're prepared to put in. And that's what they can then claim.
Did you have a question, sorry, too,
No,
Councillor
it was just to
Wilson?
to
no
reflect
worries.
that point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. You finished all your questions?
Well, actually, I'd love to ask one final one.
Oh, no, you're welcome to. I can't see any other hands up. So, yep.
Well, it was just under the walking and cycling improvements. So, for example, if you look at, I'm on page 104, and Dunedin City, walking and cycling improvements, they got 80 grand next year, 145 grand, 30 grand, and then it stops. Whereas if you compare that with QLDC, and walking and cycling improvements, they're 202, 3 million, 2 million, 1 million, 1.4, 1.9, 1 point. So does that, honestly sort of reflect, I mean, I've heard central government's view on cycling and so forth. They just seem to want us to drive everywhere. Does that reflect that Dunedin City is sort of the end of its cycling and roading improvements and that QLDC is at the beginning? Or have I sort of missed that, or is that because of central government policy?
So it doesn't reflect that Dunedin City Council is at the end of it. I think Dunedin City would be one of those councils that is definitely in the, we're happy with what we've put in, but we'd like more money. And so walking and cycling was a big part of their program.
So how did QLDC get quantums more?
It's around their LTP processes, like they're having to do a 9-year program. So there will be future funding in those future years.
Yeah.
But they focused on what we call the NLTP period, the National Land Transport, which is only done for 3 years, to get funding in this round. And as they do their 9-year program, we'll vary the future for the RLTP.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Great to see you, Councillor Kelleher. And yeah, if you've got a question.
Thanks. Look, I might be missing this in the paper, but my sort of interpretation of the paper is that it's, look, I accept that there's a real funding crisis for just about everything across New Zealand, but in this transport space, it seems to me that we're battling to fund just standing still. And I look across our region, and there's places that are just blatantly obvious for desperate need for a different solution, and the likes of the Nevis Bluff, which is must be millions of dollars spent on it every year just to sit with the way it is. The transport problems in Frankton through to Lake Hayes, and I suppose does the committee have the ability to have a schedule of the things that, in the committee's view, might be an ask too far at the moment, but 4-laning from BP Roundabout through to Lake Hayes, or an alternative solution to Nevis Bluff, the single-lane bridges that we have across the network, and especially in QLDC, but also in CODC, does the committee have that sort of ambitious list and the ability to ask for it?
Kate's going to cover that one. Thanks,
I think that's
Gary.
a political question. Look, we've certainly heard a lot of concerns, and there are many, many examples. And if I were to repeat the words of someone who talked about the North Island GPS, which has got, I think, 2 projects of roads of national significance in the South Island and none south of Christchurch, it is difficult, and it's something that at the South Island, Alexa and I are trying to... South Island generally is concerned about the lack of investment, and it is a very, very political space. But we're doing some work at that level, led by ECAN and supported by all of the TAs and regional land transport committees in the South Island, to say, how do we look at this model, because it's not working, because it's at the moment per capita, and it's, you know, if you look at per capita for the South Island, much more difficult landscape, but also much less, you know, spread. It's a fraught model, and it's not working well. Southland have done some really good work on per capita exports and what that's doing for the country. But it's a really hard message, and the stats are really hard to get to show that. Yeah, so we're advocating both at the committee, but realistically, using the constraints we've got of the model and the percentages for far rating and everything, and the investment that's required by those territorial authorities to get the money, this is the best that we could get at the moment, and it's realistic, and the councils can do it. The advocacy pit is at the South Island Regional Chairs, and we're doing a bit of work to try and get the better headspace to do that. It's really hard.
Just on the BP roundabout comment, Gary, there is the Queenstown package, which includes that, and there is I'm not sure if you call it a fix, but there is a program happening that does address the Queenstown East.
2 years, 3 years.
Richard, have you got further?
I just think that what you said right at the start, Gary, is probably the most relevant thing. Is we're short of funding everywhere. So we know that the government, in terms of NZ Te Waka Kotahi's bucket, has the direction's been changed, and actually they haven't got all the funding there that they might want. We've heard the narrative around the pressure on territorial local authorities to fund everything they need, particularly around the Three Waters space, and there's a number of things happening in annual plan and long-term plan spaces between now and 30 June next year. And so while there are a number of roading projects right around the region that we in the community and the TLAs would want to deliver, it's a very constrained funding environment, both in terms of the capital required from the road controlling authority, and even for us in the public transport space. We saw what happened in Dunedin with the Dunedin business case. So this plan will reflect the agency's ability to fund over the period that they've put the plan in for. I don't think it reflects what everyone would like to do. It's just the reality of the financial situation at the moment, and the job is there just to continue to, for, as Kate said, the South Island chairs to continue to lobby for at least more match funding, so when the capital is available locally, we can get those projects in the plans and funded.
Thank you. Can I ask a subsequent question?
You're welcome to, yeah.
Thank you. No, I accept all of that. I guess my fear is that, you know, we sit with a bare minimum, and I thought New Zealand had, you know, for a low population base, had always been quite advanced in how it managed to achieve a relatively good standard of state highways, especially, but also local arterial routes and local roads. But I just fear that we are actually at a risk of slipping totally behind, especially in the Queenstown area, as the development gets ahead of the ability to service that development. And I think QLDC are at a hiding to nothing in that they need to keep approving developments. But unless government is prepared to assist in upgrading the ability for traffic to transit through that area, then there is a risk of being actually well short and becoming a very urgent need to resolve that situation. But I mean, I'm worried that isn't identified enough in the planning. Am I wrong with that though? Is that known enough and can be made aware enough to the government at the moment?
Yeah, does the plan emphasise that enough, I guess is the question. Yep, Councillor Wilson's going to answer. Yep.
Well, if it doesn't, it certainly has been messaged at a number of levels and a number of places. But I also will note that it isn't necessarily more roading. It is about providing more transport. Oddly, most of the international tourists who come into that airport are very well aware of using public transport and the options of that. So we need to do that work. I'm pretty excited that
In our long-term plan, we have some investigation into some of that stuff in that area, but whether it's responsive enough and is quick enough, and I think the other exciting thing is the discussions about alternative methods, whether it be whoosh or other ones. There are active discussions about totally different modes of public transport, which are pretty exciting, but whether they'll come to fruition is unknown. There's something meant to be planned for next year with whoosh investment, but whether that happens is...
It's a commercial question, really, isn't it? Yep. Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Lorraine, did you want to touch on that question? You look like you might.
Oh, I just was going to make the point that the RLTP feeds up into the National Land Transport Program. The Queenstown package is funded by Crown, which used to be the NZUP, so there's a slight differentiation there. That's outside of its direct appropriation. It's not through the National Land Transport program and the National Land Transport Fund, and we will be NZTA as a member of the Alliance delivering the Queenstown package has agreed to come and present to you that program of works in September.
Oh, good. That's great. Yep. Thanks for that update. Now, I had Councillor Malcolm, then Weir, and then Forbes, sorry. Yep.
Two wee questions. Page 60. I fully understand your vision statement and have come to an agreement with my learned colleague beside me that the commas are in the right spot, so we'll leave that alone. Looking at rural areas, page 60, and it's really good because Emerson's are a real good friend of mine, but you've got in the larger urban areas of Dunedin and Queenstown, would we want to call that larger? Otherwise we might have the Temperance League have a crack.
Well, that's just north Dunedin.
We'll find them.
Yeah, cool. And so just when we go back to the four GPS statements that have been made under economic, so the priority is economic growth, increased maintenance, safety and value for money. Are we confident that we have got that emphasised enough that we are ensuring that maintenance program and safety are our key drivers, and that when we're doing those things that we are looking at economic growth for Otago? Because if you look at the projected figures of growth in Otago, we've currently got 90,000 15 to 39-year-olds, and in 2048 we're only going to have 89,000. So somewhere in that system we need to really ensure that we are increasing our maintenance, ensuring our safety, but most probably importantly that we are increasing our economic growth to keep these people here. So are we comfortable that balance is right in that plan? I know it's quite a big question, but you are driving the plan towards those four priorities.
Has the economy been given enough emphasis, I suppose? Yeah.
So I think it has, and this was part of the change also between the first and the second GPS, where it did become clearer around especially the prosperity, economic prosperity. However, again, I'd say that that was kind of the GPS for the North Island, and there's a very strong focus on Auckland and Wellington, and even Christchurch is not emphasised. So I think to the extent that we can, for our regional objectives, we have put a priority on that, while staying consistent with the GPS.
All right. And could I just have one further one on? So, going on to page 73, which is around our. Yeah, I'm just going to pick on Dunedin because there's only one column there. But so currently in Dunedin, we have 68% of our people driving a vehicle to work. They're either jumping jumping in someone else's, in a company car, or they're jumping in their own car, so that's 68%. And we've got and there's only 10% walking. I've rounded a couple of these up. And currently we've only got 3.4% of those workers using our bus. And if our aim is to increase that, if I think I'm right, to 8% with our bus plan for Dunedin. So that will take us still of 60% of the people in urban Dunedin still driving to work. So have we got, how do we crack that code as a major emissions reduction? How are we going to crack that? And what thought has been given? Because that 8% doesn't do, to me, seems to do very little in the overall problem of Dunedin still having 60% of the people driving a car to work.
So we're talking about a country, like for the last region I came from, that was in the 90s, the people who, drive private vehicles, private occupancy vehicles to and from work. So for Dunedin, we're starting on a good base. I know the numbers sound low, but in terms of those emissions and actually in sort of, I guess, network outcomes, so more efficient people and goods moving through the network, the changes at the margins really do make a difference. The example that I've used, which is quite important, but probably a bit for like a North Island context going back that way, in Auckland when the motorways clog up, which is most days, in the holidays, school holidays, they're mostly free-flowing and you can drive anywhere at any time, but peak times, not during school holidays, there's major congestion, and that's not good for the economy. It's not also good for the environment. But the actual difference of traffic, actual vehicles on the road, is around 11%. So between free flow and congested, you don't actually have to remove half the vehicles, or to get those greatly improved metrics for which drive your economics as well. Your prosperity and your movement, goods and freight.
I think I'll just add, this is one of our tools. We've got a future development strategy. We're just starting our regional passenger transport plan review. That's another lever. So there's a lot of different ways that we can try and get that mode shift. But I think Lorraine's point is that it doesn't need to be massive to make a difference in terms of the economy.
I'm not talking about I am talking about the economy, but I'm talking about the emissions. So it does. So if your driver is under that metric, we've freed up the roads for more people to drive more. So I wonder, I'll leave it to another time. But I just think there needs to be for major areas we can't get people onto, which will be all electric buses soon, onto buses and using those services. We're not actually fixing the emission problems.
Yeah, and part of that. It's a social issue as much as anything. We've got to understand why people aren't getting on buses. I don't jump on a bus because I've got to run around after a child, and logistically we can't make it work. And so it's about making sure that we can deliver the optimal bus service for the most number of people, to make it as convenient as possible, knowing that there'll always be some people that can't or won't use a bus.
Councillor Weir, I think.
Yeah. You sort of did talk to this already, but I just want to outline. Just wonder if you're able to outline exactly what boxes need to be checked from us approving this to these different activities that are in the program actually happening and being constructed and coming to fruition. And does that differ whether it's in the DCC or OSC or NZTA work streams?
Once it's approved, we all submit, each RCA and ourselves, we submit our parts of the program, and then it disappears into...
You might just need to shift the mic straight to, like, you have to be right on it, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So basically, it all goes into the what we call the Transport Investment Online, which is where the funds get allocated, like the cut-off comes from the National Land Transport Program. Once it's in the National Land Transport Program, if it's low cost, low risk, for instance, we're good to go as soon as it's adopted. The improvements, which in our case is the big one, obviously, is the Queenstown PT improvements. We've had our business case, it's been endorsed by the board. Our program doesn't roll out so much in the first 3 years anyway. But for the other authorities, it will just be where they are at their business case approvals, and assuming everything has gone through for their LTPs, so they've got their local share.
Councillor Forbes.
No, I'm sorry, that wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Okay then. Anyone else for questions? Perfect. Do you want to second that, Councillor Forbes? Fantastic. And they're all going together, yeah, with that amendment of adding in Otago to C. We can put them all together. So all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you once again, everyone that's been involved today. That's great to get to this point. Right, next is 10.3, which is the South Dunedin Future Programme. Oh, Jonathan is there waiting, so hopefully you haven't been waiting forever, Jonathan, but it's great to have you there. We've had Jonathan and Jean-Luc preparing this, but we've got Tom coming forward as well at the moment in the chamber, just so that you know, Jonathan, we're just getting organised. And yeah, we're basically in your hands if you would like to introduce the paper. There's been a little bit of media attention on this one already, which is good to see as well, some good coverage there. So yeah, over to you, Jonathan, unless Tom, you wanted to start. No? Yep, Jonathan, it's you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can see you, we can hear you, it's perfect.
Fabulous. Okay, that's the first step. So just a couple of brief comments and then take the paper as read. Essentially, sort of the key bit, I guess, is that final page of the update, which is the overview of the 5-year program that we've got. We're essentially halfway through. We're on track to deliver an adaptation plan for South Dunedin by the end of 2026. But the key bit is the next 6 months is kind of crunch time. This is when we are going to go from, high-level conceptual conversations to sort of real-world examples, and that's going to be meaningful, that's going to be impactful for people, and it's going to define the problem in a really clear way for the first time, and it's also going to kind of put out the first kind of illustration of what the future for South Dunedin might look like. So against that backdrop, I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, that's, no doubt there will be some questions, and yeah, we're at the pointy half of the program, aren't we, where we're looking at the adaptation approaches, and the overall vision and shape of South Dunedin will be refined and set out in an adaptation plan. So yeah, that's great to be getting towards that end, but yeah, we know that it's not going to be easy, but these programs are really important and needed, because we need to be addressing the things that aren't easy, and that's what our job is in local government. So thanks for the work that you've been doing there, Jonathan, and team, and to our staff as well. Okay, questions? Councillor Scott.
Cool. Hey, thank you for all the work. I mean, I particularly enjoyed the article in the ODT, clarified a few things, where it said that your new risk assessment for the suburb was due in September and a report on adaptation options by November. It talks about that it's a necessary but potentially challenging step. So, I mean, as you said, the rubber's met the road. It potentially could be contentious. How will the risk assessment and the adaptation options be communicated to the community? How will that happen?
It's starting to happen already in terms of we're starting to go out and have conversations with community stakeholders, with organisational, institutional partners in this, signalling what's coming. So basically what the assessment's going to look at, what it might say or do, and what the implications of that might be. This paper to the councils is part of that process, so kind of signalling both to the councils and to the media and the wider community about what we think is coming down the pipe. There's an enormous amount of effort going into thinking about, you know, a risk assessment is maybe a sort of 150-page, quite technical report, but we're looking at ways to how do you distill down the key elements of that, ensure that we kind of communicate that to the community, to an everyday reader. People can look at it, understand it. There's going to be a lot of visualisations, as an example, in there that are generally easy for people to pick up and understand. And we'll have a lot of, I guess, kind of media briefings. We'll be pre-briefing certain stakeholders. We'll be available afterwards to do kind of workshops and other things.
Thank you. And the reports will be online on our website, so anybody can go in and read the detail?
Yeah, so there'll be, and that's one of the other things, is kind of taking a bit of an E strategy, where there will be a 150-page report, but most people, I think, will be interested in kind of the maps. So we're looking at having kind of an online viewer where people can access either through DCC or ORC websites, either existing or new, kind of zoom in and out, change different layers, and get a feel for how things change over time, what it means for their particular area.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Mefam.
Jonathan, is there a deliberate approach to avoid public meetings? I remember being at the last one and it was difficult. Any comment?
Look, we've got a wide range of stakeholders with lots of different views. We have committed to being open and transparent with this, so we are fronting up and talking to people. At the same time, we want to ensure a safe space and format for all of the community and everyone to ask questions. So we're looking at that. Maybe town hall style meetings aren't the best approach, and we have kind of pivoted and done a bit more of a approach to engaging with umbrella stakeholder groups. We had an expo in March where we had kind of 2 days with a space in the Edgar Centre where people kind of came and went. So maybe less of a chance to just do a short town hall opportunity where it might be more easily disrupted, and actually sit down and have some conversations with people on their terms. So it's worked quite well, but it has influenced how we're going to approach the next stages.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Weir.
I just wanted to know, the report mentioned sort of bringing in the St Kilda coastal plan into the program, or sort of merging them. Just wondering, since that's a DCC one, how that would affect decision making of the South Australian Future program, or if it would affect it in any way.
Yeah, it's the two programs obviously deal with some quite similar issues, and geographically quite similar as well. They did start at different times, and were in different phases, but with both of them we are getting to a point where sort of early 2025 we'll be dealing with some quite developed adaptation options, and there's a point where you've got to start to look at those on one piece of paper. So what you do at the coast has a direct influence about what you do directly behind the coast and in the broader suburbs. So we're of the view that we need there's real value in going through a bit of a merger. We're starting to look at that in terms of a coherent and kind of singular comms and engagement approach. But governance of the two programs is one of the things that we'll have to step through over the coming months as we look to kind of shape up how that merger might happen. And I imagine we'll be coming back to council with some advice and recommendations.
Just to add to that, the anticipation always was that the South Dunedin Futures program would have actions that were ORC-led, actions that were DCC-led, and actions that were sort of led in some other way. And so this will just be one that potentially is more led out of DCC. Having said that, we've got jurisdiction in the coast as well, so it's useful to bring it in.
Yep, another question.
I also just wanted to know the research that's been done at the Centre of Sustainability at the uni seems to have the research partnership with the Centre for Sustainability seems to have proved quite fruitful. I'm just wondering if we're sort of proactively providing this research with other regional councils and stuff around the country. I know it is like publicly available and stuff, but just like really collaborating with them on this stuff.
Yes, we are. So we've recently completed the third product. We are planning to do a bit of a Dunedin-based research seminar for largely Dunedin-based stakeholders. But Jean-Luc and I and others that across DC and ORC that work in the adaptation space are plugged into a national network of adaptation practitioners across the country, and it is something that we'll look at around, we think this is really high value research. It takes an applied lens, so we think it's really relevant for kind of day-to-day practitioners, and I think we'll be looking for opportunities to share it.
Awesome.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Does somebody care to move the recommendations? Councillor Scott, seconded Councillor Weir. Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Scott?
No, just a big thank you and for the transparency in terms of, I take this in particular as a bit of a heads up to the governance, heads up to the community that there's some information on the table, and let's get engaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? I just wanted to say, it is a bit of a heads up. We've gone into this program eyes wide open, and we being local government, DCC, ORC, and our communities, mana whenua as well, we've laid out the program really clearly with the diagrams, and we've all known where we're going and when. So the recommendations there are noting the activities we have done. We're noting the pending completion of 2 crucial stages of work. And then the other one is noting that that the delivery of those reports will basically mean that we then are required to go into the next stage. And like I say, we go into that eyes wide open that we will be required as local government and their communities and mana whenua to come together. We need to deal with the risks. So talk about how best to do that, knowing what those risks are. And so the program is delivering there. And then selecting the options on how to live and plan for a really good future in Dunedin. So we need to be selecting those options, and we need to be thinking about the transition times for that. And we can't shy away from that. So today is an important decision of us going in, eyes wide open, that is what we are going to be doing by moving into this next stage. And that is really important. Really difficult conversations to have, but actually really, really crucial that we do those conversations and that we do them really well. And we think about all options, we've got our eyes really open on that, and we talk about the transition times really sensibly as well. So that is all I wanted to say, and once again, just check no one else wanted to speak. Okay, well, we'll put those then, and all in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Jonathan, Tom and Anita. On to a different subject now. 10.4 is the progress update on ORC's efficiency review.
That's just me.
Oh, sure. So, this is going to be covered by Richard today. We don't have the report writers with us, so that's great. Richard, did you want to introduce the report?
Very briefly. So we delivered this report just for noting previously and committed to coming back after we'd considered the recommendations within that report. At the time, we discussed that due to generally the workload, where we could, we would look to start some work on these recommendations as part of the long-term plan process, but we wouldn't get through all of them, and this was about providing an update on where we're at and how we're looking to move this forward. So there is a wider business improvement program of which the recommendations in here will form a part of, and as an executive team we'll be starting to do some more work on that. We've got the Te Korowai or review ongoing at the moment. We've had a cultural audit completed that's going to mana to mana and will come to council. And there's a number of things happening that these recommendations will form part of overall business improvement. But we know this was requested by council at that annual plan time and is considered an important report. So we're very conscious of these specific recommendations and make sure we implement them. A number of them will be picked up through the annual plan process around things like fees and charges, work planning, measuring. The one in there that we will need some further conversations with council on is that one around defining efficiency and how we measure it. It's not a really simple thing to do, so we need to give some thought to that and come back to this table so we all can agree on how we will do that. Otherwise the risk is that these conversations will just continue to go around in circles because we've all got a slightly different view around what efficiency is. So I've had some conversations with Bruce and Stu from Morrison Lowe who supported this report, and we need to do a little bit more work there and come back on that particular recommendation. So happy to take any questions about what's in there. I guess the commitment in the report is that we will we acknowledge the importance of this report and of being able to demonstrate our value to the community of the money we're spending and being able to demonstrate that efficiency. So we will make sure that we report back to council on progress and also come back and have that conversation around what actually do we agree efficiency is and how will we show it.
Councillor Mefam.
Yeah, Richard, how would you feel about bringing this into your CE report monthly so that we can keep an eye on it? I mean, it's an important document for us, and we've had the annual, the 10-year plan drop off out of your report now.
Yep.
So, I mean, this would be another important document to come through so we can keep an eye on it every single month, if that would be...
I don't have an issue with including it. I would suggest that month to month, you might not see massive amounts of change, certainly quarterly, and then we could bring a more substantive report through at the right time. I'm happy to take that sort of under consideration for the right time to make sure there's regular updates on the progress that we're making.
Well, if we could settle on the quarterly report, that would be good, yeah.
Councillor Scott.
I thought it was a really good report and I'm happy to move. Was there a time frame, Richard, for this? That was the only question that I had. Like, is this going to carry on for years, or is it going to be over the next year? Or
no, look, some of them will take a bit longer, and we've tried to indicate, I guess, the complexity of them. I wouldn't want any of these to be carrying on for years. You know, we need to address them and make some decisions on how we do some of these things. And certainly, you know, we would want to have all this locked well in place by the time we were tackling another long-term plan. So it hasn't got timeframes included because we still need to go away and balance this around some other priorities for business improvement.
But at some point there might be timeframes?
Yeah.
Cool.
Give that indication as we progress.
I'm happy to move at some time.
Sure, we'll just check there aren't any other questions. Councillor Malcolm.
Yep, probably just a couple of things. It's going to be hard to do this. I'll just move it then. How do you break it, Elliot? You just pull the end, do you?
Yeah.
Just on page 176, and I thought I'd actually cleared that up way back in September when we had the report from Morrison Lowe. They're still saying that Morrison believe that council still maintains one of the lowest spends per head of population. And in fact, when we actually add the dividend from Port Otago into that equation, our rates impost, or if we took that away, would be talking another 130, 140 per rating unit, which takes our average well above the average of rateable, of councils in New Zealand. So I just, what I'm really concerned about is losing what we are actually paying and that's nothing really to do with your efficiency, but it's probably showing showing everyone, the value we get from the port, but the fact that we have only got 124 rating units that we're imposing our rates upon, and that we need to be very careful that that's not getting out of kilter. And perhaps in a lot of stuff, and we've just heard it from Mr. Upton today, a lot of stuff that we should perhaps be pushing back for government to do, paying for the monitoring that we're doing or the likes. So I'm really worried that if we continue to use that terminology, it doesn't actually reflect the true position.
So understand that, and I'd have to go back and check the details. I think that they were drawing some comparisons, and it's difficult because every council will have their own model around dividends or whatever they might be collecting. So I get what you're saying, and we do have to be careful in terms of our language. And we are in that fortunate position where we get a significant dividend from port year on year. I think what we've reflected in there is what Morrison Lowe presented. But I do recall that conversation, just not in enough detail to give you a full response on what that should say or needs to say.
Can I ask for clarification on that? Okay. Just in terms of the spend, it's regardless of the fact that we get a dividend, the spend is still the lowest per head. I mean, the dividend's income. And so our income streams are from dividends, from rates, and from investment. That's our income. Our spend is our expenditure on all those things. So
That's right. It's not just rates, it's overall spend.
But if you go back to what they said in December, if you go back, you'll see that graph is based on an average rate take. So that's what I'm saying is
based on average rate take.
It doesn't include the port dividend.
Okay. No, it's just this paragraph doesn't actually.
That paragraph refers to just expenditure divided by, and the conversation at times around economic. I think they used the term when they presented that ORC is still economic. And that was where I think that was.
That's correct.
And they made the point that we hadn't necessarily defined efficiency, and they weren't clear either in terms of being able to say whether we were efficient or not based on the information that they had.
And can I carry on?
You're welcome to.
And again, this is, I think there will be a question. On 177, where possible, perform comparisons of ORC's activities with other local government bodies by performing benchmarking to gauge efficiency levels. So the only thing I have on that's page 177 and 8, the second last bullet point. And I suppose if you could comment on that would assume it doesn't necessarily assume that we are efficient or any of the other councils are efficient. What that has only given us a mark of our level of efficiency against their level of efficiency. It doesn't actually show us whether we're efficient or not.
So that was when we briefed and we brought the brief to council. It was what things do we want to look at to give us an indication, and that's one of the 4 things there that they looked at, but on its own it doesn't tell us anything.
No.
It has to be looked at in the context of the other information they gather as well.
Cool, right, and just one more, Chair.
No
so we go into page 178, which is a diagram, just not quite as good as the one that took Mr. Upton 6 years to
the amoeba.
The amoeba. Well, no, it is actually, but I'm just. One of the things to me that came out of the Morrison Lowe report, and often I see it out with our ratepayers, and I think a lot of it is a perception rather than fact, and from my knowledge of how many of our staff are working, where in this business transformation approach are we ensuring that we're breaking down the organisational silos? And that was highlighted in the Morrison Lowe report. But I just, so we are one voice, we're one action, and we're an enabling attitude right across the ORC. So where do any of those show me that from the report we said we've got silos? It's a perception, so where are we breaking that perception down or making those steps, Richard?
So definitely two things. If we deal with the perception thing first, there is just a way of working, and I'd be looking at the people sitting behind you in terms of the way we want to drive the culture of the organisation where staff are working together and looking for those opportunities. In terms of the actions, if you go to page 181, the second section around strategic and integrated planning, and the third point there, strategic and operational planning framework approach to coordinating resources and consolidating work programs. So as we develop a more, I guess, an improved work planning and work programming that feeds into annual plans and then teams' detailed work programs, we will be able to identify those opportunities where teams can connect and share resources and make sure we're not duplicating things. And then in an ideal world, we will then be able to use those work plans to go and engage with those other stakeholders and community and catchment groups that we also know are doing some of this work, and identify where we can leverage off that as well. So trying to just be really smart with the resources that everybody has got. And that's where I thought it was in page 181. Thank you very much. But I just, thanks for explaining that, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. No other questions by the looks of it. Recommendations are there. Somebody, Councillor Scott, you were moving them, weren't you? Somebody said Councillor Malcolm. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Scott?
No.
No.
Thank you. Keep
Anyone
up
else?
the good work.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to it? Councillor Wilson.
No.
Yep.
I'll wait.
Yep.
Look, I think this is a really good start at the work. I'm just going to, because the CEO raised it in its chief shop probably, but the idea of what efficiency means is something that we all need to be really critical of, and not just in this sort of space. And I'm really concerned that if we don't have really rigorous conversations about what efficiency means, not just in this space, but in land and water and various other places, we will not get what we think we're getting. And I don't think we've had those conversations. Are really difficult ones to have, and I think we should be having them.
Councillor Malcolm.
I was actually asked at in the Mania Toto the other day if the phrase that I used was the new catchphrase for the ORC, and that was ORC 2024. And I simply said it that I was confident, especially after this review by Morrison Lowe and the general and the change in the leadership team and the likes, that we are definitely heading in the right direction. So to me, this report gives me even more confidence that we've taken on board what that report has highlighted, and that we are moving in a very good direction. So keep the reporting back to us at a minimum, because we want the actions and just not the reporting. So, but yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Mepham.
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce that and just follow up from what I was mentioning before, Richard. Just there's a level of accountability here to council that needs to be established around this, otherwise it may drift. So that's really important that we see that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mepham. Well said, and I'm sure that the point has been taken on board. And yeah, there were some actions there that Richard said he could give, so thanks. Any other debate then? Okay, well, we can put those recommendations then. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 10.6, Kylie. This is quite... Oh, no, did I skip one? Oh, God. Oh, that's not important. Crikey. 10.5 then, Remuneration Authority Determination for 24-25. Yep, so we all understand what's involved with this paper. This is authored by Amanda. I'm not sure, Amanda. Yeah, if you'd like to come forward, that's fantastic. There could be some questions about the procedure here or review that's coming up in more detail, all those types of things. But yeah, basically we all know that the Remuneration Authority makes determinations and that we actually don't really get a say on what those are. So yeah. Amanda, did you want to introduce anything?
I don't think I've got anything further to add apart from what you've talked about, just that it comes from the Remuneration Authority. They do their annual review and their annual determination, and yeah, so that's what's come out this year. They've signalled that they will do a deeper dive ahead of the elections, which is what they did a couple of years ago as well, to reset that governance pool.
Yeah, Councillor Mefam.
Yeah, it's just a quick question. It's just for clarification. The way we work is that we have co-chairs, and so most councillors have additional responsibilities. But just in this table here, it seems to show that you've got the chair, you've got the deputy, and then you've got a councillor with no additional responsibilities. When in fact we all have additional responsibilities as co-chairs. It just doesn't follow the way we do it.
Yes, so that came from the table that they gave us to fill in to send back to them at the start of the triennium, because the remaining, once you had the chair and the deputy chair and the remaining councillors it was evenly distributed, it became essentially the same as having councillors with no additional responsibilities.
Yeah, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, it is Rem Authority language. Yep.
Thanks, Amanda. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I'd have a slightly different view. The fact that councillor with... Oh, I see, with no additional...
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's their language. Yeah.
Yep. What I was going to say is...
No. How are you getting home tomorrow?
Thanks, Tom. That's a good point.
Yeah, and look, for next time we could specify co-chair, finance committee, we could specify those specific roles and have the same rem out. I guess it was more efficient to have
it's actually featured
all
in the
other
ODT.
councillors.
So, there's a little bit of misinformation going out there, I think, around this.
Yep, we'll take that on board for next time round.
And submit to their review. Perhaps that their terminologies are possibly dated. We could do that too. Councillor Weir.
Just a follow-up for that would just be, if we were, are we anticipating having a look at committee structures or anything anytime soon, or roles in those committee structures? And then if we did, would that change the allocations as well?
I'll defer to the chair on that one.
Yeah, it's not on this. This isn't a paper, so yeah, we can discuss that one at any point, of course, but it's not on the agenda and it's not the paper at the moment. So yeah, thank you anyway. Okay, any other questions on this paper?
Happy to move.
I was just actually wondering whether or not, Amanda, you could answer how long it has been since there has been an increase in remuneration for elected members.
Sure. So this is the first increase from in the annual review in a long time, but they did review the pools ahead of the last elections, and so there was an increase that came through. A small increase that came through that pre-election review. But in terms of an annual determination, putting an increase in, there hasn't, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been one for a while.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, just I guess, okay, we should probably move it and then I might say something actually. So yeah, we've got the recommendation there. Coming to that, which is 3 points: receiving the report, noting the updates, updated, it should be instead of updates, updated remuneration rates for local authority members, and approves the 2024 ORC council expenses, reimbursements and allowances policy. Mover, Councillor Weir, I can second. All in favour? Aye. Against, carried. And yeah, I was meaning to say, and then I forgot, that actually, our team and other teams of councils across the country have not had pay rises for a significant amount of time, and when they have been very small. So I just think that needs to be noted in light of a lot of additional workload for not just this council but a number of, pretty much all councils I'd say across the country, and just did want to make that point. Thank you. Okay, so...
Can I ask a question? Sorry, it's about an attachment. I didn't want to get in the way of the...
Sure.
One of the attachments is the principles, and we've been given a hard time, and I can't remember, someone was very concerned about the number of cars that were going to meetings, including our own, and just in the principles of the reimbursement policy is a clause that where council-provided transport is available and not used, mileage allowance is not claimable. And it is a question, I don't necessarily want an answer right now, but what the policy is for councillors sharing, but also councillors going with staff to meetings, because that hasn't been something that I've understood well, and it would be good to have some clarity around at some stage, not necessarily today.
Would you like to come back on that at some stage? Yeah, thank you. Thanks for raising that, Councillor Wilson. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Right, yeah, that was probably our fault. 10.6 is documents then, signed under council seal, authored by Kylie. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Mepham. Anyone want to raise anything that they've noticed that's out of place? Pretty straightforward, this report. So nothing coming up. So we'll put that then. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. The next part then is a resolution to exclude the public. Thank you. So just need to do that in public, obviously, first of all. So the resolution is that the public be excluded from the following part of the proceedings of the meeting, namely 1.1 Chief Executive Annual Performance Review and KPIs for 24-25. Just giving a little bit of time for anyone that wants to move. Yeah, there's a table of reasons there, which has actually been updated, I believe, as well, Kylie. Maybe not. Yeah, it's the usual reason of protecting privacy of natural persons. And yeah, I also need to move before you, or you need to move, whoever wants to do that, Doug Craig of the RDC Group be permitted to remain at this meeting after the public has been excluded because of his knowledge of the annual performance review and KPIs. This knowledge will be of assistance in relation to the matter to be discussed and relevant to that matter because of his ongoing consultation, but it should be, I suppose it's consultation, consultant's knowledge. Yeah. Thank you. I've got a mover of Councillor Wilson and seconded Councillor Forbes. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So we're now public excluded, so we're just waiting for the room to clear. We're going to do we need to take an adjournment just to get all set up? Or